think we are loud, live, and we are certainly in color. Amen. Won't he do it? I think we are loud, live, and we are certainly in. Oh, yep. Yes, we are. So hello, everyone. It is your host, CTV, also known as Davion. We're here with another riveting episode / podcast of Consciouz TV. I have a wonderful guest today, and I am looking forward to this journey of mysticism and Christianity and just the evolution of ego to soul to spirit. Now, this young man, I'm going to let him tell you all about how we eventually intersected with each other in life. Hello, it's all hot air. How are you doing today? Before we get into this dialogue, I definitely want you guys to thumbs up this video. Make sure that you subscribe if you haven't. Hit the notification bell to keep up with all of my latest uploads, okay? That'll be quite wonderful. And I want to say thank you to all of my patrons and all of my donators. Thank you guys so much. You guys are continuously donating to me as it related to a car accident I was involved in 2 months ago, and I greatly appreciate you guys' donation. It has taken a big stress off of me, okay? So I want you guys to just get you some tea, get you some snacks, just come forth and listen to this conversation. You also are allowed to ask questions if any of you guys even want to come on board towards the end of our dialogue and kind of chime in and ask me or Cal any questions about anything that showed up in this dialogue today. You certainly will have an opportunity to. And I just want to say hello to everyone coming in. Hello to all of my mods. Hello to all the CTV members, and hello to all of those coming from Cal's platform and kingdom as well. So with no further ado, let's get into our guest of honor.
Hello.
Okay.
How is everyone? It is a pleasure to be on the Consciouz TV channel. I am pleased to be here. Pleasure to meet you all. Yeah, man, let's get to it. Let's engage.
You should be honored. I'm very antisocial.
I made the cut. I'm a part of the
group. Made the cut, man. Well, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your platform, what inspired you to even become a content creator, and what inspired you to produce the type of content that you produce as a content creator?
Sure. Well, as you can see, my name is Melkez. Just briefly about me, I came from a Christian background, so I do have a structural background in Christian theology and how it relates to the world, but I am pretty diverse when it comes to religions. And I became a content creator after having several astral projection experiences, several mystic experiences, where I felt like I needed to create a community of people that were seeking true, authentic spirituality outside of the filtering of a church. They just wanted to really get in contact with what this whole thing was about. And I made the channel for that purpose so that I could reach out to those people. And it's been a great time. I make videos on how to astral project, how to develop psychic abilities, my random excursions with psychedelics or, astral projection or magic and all those different things, like how to meet your guides. I'm just like a very general spiritual. I just like hanging out and chatting. So that's what we do a lot of on the channel. Hello, everyone. Hello.
Just a buffet of metaphysics going on.
Indeed.
Indeed. So tell the people a little bit about how you and I kind of intersected as of recently.
So I got this idea to start branching out my channel because I wanted to. Well, though I felt like I was building a community, I felt like I was very disjointed from the spiritual community as a whole on YouTube. So I felt like getting on the podcast, interviewing people, speaking to people on their platforms would be a good way of integrating with them and the other people that they host on their show as well. And so I found Truth Seeker, and I found, I found you on there after I did my interview with him. And right after seeing it, I was like, oh yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. It's just a few things you said, and I was like, okay, that's on point. That's on point. I like that. I'm vibing with that. So it didn't take long for me to kind of reach out to you. I think it was actually that you were. I was in the podcast that you were in with True Seek. I was kind of in the chat, and you were mentioning the podcast I had done with him, and I just happened to be there, so I was like chiming in, and then we just linked up naturally, and it's been an interesting ride. It's I've definitely come into the community a lot more, so the goal has been at least initiated.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of you guys who don't know, True Seeker is another metaphysician. He's amazing. You guys check him out. I've posted his links. Also posted our interview in my community wall as well. You say that there were certain things that stood out to you about the dialogue. Do you recall any of those things, or would you like to share anything?
Yes, definitely. One of the main things was your concept on the egoic self and overcoming ego and how ego is pervasive in really everything we do. And it was also your approach to homosexuality in Christianity I found to be really interesting, because I've had many conversations with people about what is godly and what isn't. And it's difficult to approach the conversation when it comes to sexuality and the different forms that it takes, because people they look more toward the old letter of the law. They look toward their interpretation of it, and they're very rigid and unmoving with that. Even when there's a counter rebuttal or an antithesis that's brought up that kind of diffuses their idea of it. So the way that you were, because we spoke before about eunuchs and that whole thing, and it was just you were shedding light on that, how there are some eunuchs that are chosen and they're made eunuchs by men, but some that are eunuchs in their minds. Like they just don't have a calling to the opposite sex or anything of that nature. And so it puts them in a good position to be officials and to, work with royalty and things like that. And so I thought that was very interesting. But you can run into some very heated debates when you tell people that it shouldn't matter who they love to determine where they're going after they die. It just doesn't make sense. That and your stance on the afterlife as far as hell is concerned in the traditional Christian circles, because Truth Seeker he's a Christian mystic, I'll say, but I feel like he's still really grounded in a lot of the Christian doctrine. And so things like hell, I always found it strange that people would gladly believe that for wrongdoings of varying degree in a 60 or 70 year span could damn you to eternal torment for the rest of eternity. It just seems totally outlandish and cruel for a God to enact that sort of punishment for a being that is unconscious pretty much in comparison.
Yeah. Wow. So you also have a Christian origin and background. So
Indeed.
Tell us about your mysticism alongside your religion, because you and I and Truth Seeker have that in common, where we came from this kind of orthodox upbringing, and yet there was also kind of something else within us and around us as we journeyed through our religious affiliation. So can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing? How did you become introduced to Christianity? How did you initially relate to Christianity? And then when did your mysticism kind of begin?
Yeah. Let's see. I guess I was always a really weird kid growing up, so it was pretty natural for me to fall into a spiritual lane. And so I started to do that on my own. There were a few movies that I watched when I was younger, like The Matrix. I watched when I was really young, and it kind of gave me this warped view of reality. I was like, well, what if this isn't real at all? All that business. Hello. And so, these movies kind of ingrained this idea in me that there was something beyond this experience of reality that we were having. And when I was younger, I always felt like I had lived before. And this was before I knew what reincarnation was in the first place. I just had this notion that well, this isn't my real family, or this isn't my real life. I've done this. before. I just couldn't contextualize it. I couldn't put it into the right words. And so over time, I just started to move more and more into meditation and different practices like that. And the first things that kind of caught my interest were lucid dreaming and hypnosis. When I was growing up, I had this notion in my mind that the seat of power was in the subconscious mind. I didn't know at the time that, the subconscious mind connects to infinite intelligence and all these other ideas that people have. I just knew that there was power that I couldn't access that was held up in the subconscious mind. And I needed to access the subconscious in order to get those abilities. My goal was always to have these abilities and these powers for various different reasons in my life. So I started with self-hypnosis, and self-hypnosis eventually led me into lucid dreaming because it's a way to interact with your subconscious through the symbolism and things like that. And then I eventually moved on to astral projection. I think I had my first out-of-body experience in 2012, November 18th. I call it like my astral birthday.
Now, when you had your first projection, were you still a strong practicing Christian, or had you started already exiting or kind of evolving forward?
It's interesting because my Christian life and my mystical life were always kind of intertwined. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'd be more mystic than I would be Christian. And so Christian would be like the peripheral of what I was doing. But when I astral projected, it had been after a full year with my mentor at the time, like kind of traveling and doing different things, different ministries in different places, and becoming more aware of my own energy and like the energy of spirit and things like that. So I still considered myself Christian, but there was always this pull to more. Like there was always this pull to the extreme, I guess, of things.
Mm-hmm. So you're raised up in this religion. Mm-hmm. Your experience in mysticism, was there conflict between the two for you? I know that you said that they kind of have always been intermeshed, but were you able to find a lot of relevant information as it within the religion or within the text, within the Bible, as it relates to psychic ability, as it related to out-of-body experiences, etc.? Like, how did you make it make sense to yourself?
At first it was really difficult to get a grasp on. I didn't really see a lot of things about astral projection or any of those things when I first started diving into scripture and started like digesting it and really studying it. But I saw that the apostles, for instance, had these, amazing gifts, and I saw Jesus and all the things that he did. And so I was like, okay, there is something going on here. So when I started integrating into churches and I started going to these different churches, I noticed that wasn't what they were doing. They weren't into the, contact with spirit and, having these crazy experiences where you're seeing angels and you're having words of knowledge and you're having these, precognitions and things like that. So, and that kind of falls in line with when I met my mentor. He actually came to the church that I was at because Spirit told him to visit that church because there was someone there he was supposed to mentor. And after interacting with him and having him tell me things about my life that I hadn't shared with anyone, a very interesting reoccurring theme as well. I meet these spiritual people who just know details about my life. I was like, how do you have this this inside look into my life? But yeah, he was definitely one of those people. And when I experienced that, I kind of latched onto him. And that's kind of where the mystical things happen. It wasn't until later after that where I started to piece together where Christ was talking about these mystical themes. And I could actually say, hey, okay, that's astral projection. And like, oh, okay, I see that's third eye. I see that's connecting with spirit. That's like, so I started to put together these different mystical terms and different things like that. Because it's really just a variance in vernacular when it comes to Christians and, Muslims and Buddhists and Hindus and things like that. It's just a different language they use, and people get locked up on the syntax of, be still and know that I am God and meditate. Like it's difficult for people to take that leap, I've noticed.
So you took that leap.
Yeah, it was it didn't come without difficulty because when you're raised thinking that everything external to what people have told you exists in the Bible is demonic, and you feel this pull, you think to yourself, am I demonic? Am I doing something wrong? And it separated me from a lot of people who were in this Orthodox Christian theology that I was kind of breaking away from. But I had to. It's almost like it just pulls at you. Spirit is just like, hey, there's more. I want you to experience this. I want you to do that. I want you to go there. And unfortunately, that led me. I don't want to say unfortunately, because some people are on the left-hand path and they are thriving, and they're doing their thing. But I went to the left-hand path out of like a fear and like a running and a rebellion against everything I knew. So I became a Satanist and got into that whole thing. What's up?
That's probably the story for most left-hand paths.
Yeah, just running away from orthodoxy. It's like, I'm tired of this. Yeah. It can be very inhibiting. Being in a religion. I'm not saying religions are bad, because you need a basis to work from. Not everyone. Some people just they get caught up to the third heaven on a daily. It's their natural frame of being. But others, they need that rigid formality of a religion to jumpstart their spiritual growth.
Interesting you say that. So how would you define religion and spirituality?
Religion, I would define as a cultural retelling of an experience that someone had with divinity. And because, like we talked before, they may have encountered an angel or a spirit on a full moon, they now attribute the full moon as a god or a goddess, and they make traditions and practices around that. And for Christianity, it's much the same thing, in that one person prays for a demonic spirit to leave, and the way he did it, and when he did it, what time he did it, how many people were with them when they did it, turns into tradition and practice. So now when anybody approaches negative entities and demonic spirits, it has to be like the Catholic Church would use, like an exorcism. It has to be several people. We got to hold the person down. We have to recite these specific scriptures because someone long ago did it. It's all culture. It's all tradition. And since I do have a Christian background, basically just a studying of Christ, I see that he didn't come to graft himself into the typical mold of what a church was. He wasn't here to join the Pharisees of the day and do the same things they were doing. He was here to show people that you don't have to do that. Like that's not true relationship with spirit. That's not true divinity. That's something made to look like it. That's something to gratify ego. And that's what I see the difference between religion and spirituality to be. Spirituality is an exploration of the experiences that created religion without the filter of religion.
Yeah, I like that definition. So being involved in the church, you also were a prophet, a Christian prophet.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the defining moment where you just gave yourself like full permission to just
be weird?
Like when you allowed yourself to be married to all of the religions, be married to all of the spirituality. What was the defining moment that made you give yourself away fully?
I tend to be a pretty analytical person, despite the things we're talking about. I tend to just be locked up in the left brain a lot of the time. So when it came to my liberation from, the spiritual rigidity of Christianity, I found that studying different philosophers and different practices like Gnosticism and things like that, I began to see that it's possible. It started very difficultly. I thought to myself, it's possible that Jesus, it says in the Bible that he grew in stature, that he learned, he built his abilities, and he was in Egypt. So he learned from those Egyptian mystics. And it's possible that he learned all of these mystical things and these different practices and brung it back to Jerusalem and to that whole area where he did his ministry. And the only way he could convey those complex ideas to the people of that time was by fitting it into their worldview, because he had experienced a different reality than what they were used to. So he would call it the Father. He would call it this. He would make these different parables about what it's like to come back to that spirit and to be reintegrated with divinity. And it just got me thinking, like, isn't that what these other religions are talking about in a way? And that's when I really started to say, okay, after my studying and research, I was like, all right, let me start looking at other religions. Let me read the Upanishads, and let me start studying Hinduism a little bit more. Let me look at this guru and see what he has to say. And it seems like every religion at their core and their most innocent display of what they have to offer is telling the world that, like, love is the highest vibrational energy. Love is the greatest thing we have to offer, and that's how we connect with God. And that's when I saw, like, all right, these puzzle pieces in different religions are making the same image at the end. We're just breaking it up because that's what culture does. You know, culture divides sometimes.
Yeah. So where are you in Jesus today? I mean, you've been around the world, and what parts of Christianity is still with you? Because I definitely want to move into some other areas of metaphysics. But I think I love when mystics kind of have, especially within the Western world, where we have these intersections of, I mean, over 205 million Christians in America. We have the largest Christian population in the entire world.
That's a lot. Yeah. Only 300 million of us, right?
Yeah.
They figure in this country, yeah.
You know, and Christianity is the #1 religion of the entire globe. So there's a lot of people, especially over the past probably 10 years, who have been experiencing this awakening. This awakening feels more intuitive to them. There's not anything necessarily external to them that feels to be pushing it, but there's an inner pushing, an inner magnetism that's kind of drawing them forward. But because of the indoctrination of religion, because of the conditioning of religion, because of the hell and brimstone of religion, lots of people have kind of felt intimidated or been fearful of expanding spiritually out of offending a egotistical God who needs you to be performative under these rigid ideas and rules, and the consequences are completely terrifying. I mean, who wants to spend eternity in hell, for God's sake? So when I come across mystics who found some way to transcend that fear or that conditioning or that indoctrination, I think that's very, very significant. And I always like to get mystics to kind of tell their story about what broke up that fear, what broke up that intimidation, because there are lots of people right now watching this who will watch this. There's lots of people right now who DM me, email me, who are upon a awakening, but they have their religion anchoring them in place. And so there's this push-pull or this kind of inner battle of where to go, what to do. So I'm always curious about to know what the line of demarcation was. Like what gave you the heart of hearts? And what did you keep with you? Because I kept a large chunk of my Christianity with me, even through my evolution as a mystic.
I feel like I'm doing a lot of the same. There's a lot, and I don't mean to kind of throw daggers at people who are still heavily Christian and predominantly, Christian theologically based. I don't mean to like hurl stones at them. I'm just saying, like, to me, it feels more like something that's limiting at this point. And like you said, I have taken a lot from it. I've taken a lot of my understanding of energy and how that works and experiences in general. And I feel like for the people that are going through that struggle, I know it is a difficult struggle. I personally I was extremely religious. I was doing something every day of the week. I was going to a small group. I was going to a church service, a Bible study. I was doing something every day because I was searching legitimately for the truth. I was searching for what was pulling at my heart that was more than what I was finding in that book, that people were telling me behind a pulpit. I was searching for that what my heart was longing for, and that was true experience. And that's the best thing I can say for anyone listening, is that experience is what will give you the power to break away from rigidity and from, tradition. Experience supersedes tradition. So what I started to, and I was really blessed to have things like this happen, but uh, I did start to astral project. I did start to see that there was something different out there, and that it wasn't demonic. I wasn't possessed by anything. I started to, my clairaudience began to open, and I started like conversing back and forth with God and with angels, and I saw an angel, and these different spiritual experiences. It's almost like I was colorblind, and after these experiences I could see the full spectrum of the visible light field. Like I began to see that, okay, well, these people are having this experience over here, and on this part of the world they're experiencing that over there. I experienced this, and I experienced that, and I've experienced Vishnu, and I've experienced these other gods, and I've experienced this teleportation effect, like all these different things. So it's hard for me to say, all right, Christianity, all this stuff that I'm doing is wrong. I think, no, like Jesus wasn't here to make Christianity. That wasn't the point. He wasn't here to make another religion. That's what he was adamantly against. And so that's when I started saying, I'm going to take this spirituality thing and I'm going to put it in my book bag, and I'm going to hike by myself and figure this out. You're going to have to go the road less traveled. And Jesus actually said something like that. The way of the righteous, they're few, and it's a narrow path. Like, you're going to have to take it upon yourself to do your research, to go and study these different religions and these different practices. You're going to have to go, and you're going to have to meditate yourself and find who you really are outside of the church walls, because the church is a structure that's the main purpose of many churches today are to keep the walls up, to keep the roof on it. It's not to spiritually enrich the people. So you've got to understand within yourself that you have this potential, you have this power, because you're connected to the universe, you're connected to spirit, you're connected to the divine. So all you have to do is sit and say, okay, spirit, I want to know what this is all about. Like, I want to experience this. I want to experience what Jesus did. I want to experience all these other things that happen. And whatever happens, I want it to be beyond my understanding, because if I can understand it, I'll make it up. So you just have to walk into these experiences and say, I'm ready for whatever. I'm down for anything. And you have to trust that the universe is going to take care of you. I told someone recently during a training session that they were dealing with fear. And they were like, I'm seeing these light beings, I'm seeing these entities in my room, and I'm afraid. Like, I don't want to try to astral project. I don't want to meditate because I see them all the time. And I told that person that you're not afraid of those beings. You're afraid of fear itself. I know it sounds corny, but at the end of the day, on the other side of fear is trust. You have to begin to trust that when you put a desire out to the universe, that the universe will get that back to you. And it's the same thing Jesus said. If you ask the Father for a stone, he's not going to give you. If you ask him for a loaf of bread, he's not going to give you a stone. It's this idea that if you genuinely seek, that you will receive in like kind with the energy that you're putting out. Yeah. Hope that kind of answered the question a little bit.
Oh, I love like what you just said. And just go back to a point about I like to think of theology and relationship to spirit as theology is kind of like the rumor mill of what you've heard about the divine. It's that space of a lot of assumption, a lot of subjectivity, a lot of other people's experience. But relationship is like when you finally get to have a moment with that individual, and then the catalyst is then a matter of faith. Like, wow, I've heard so many things about you, God, from religion. But now that I'm up close and I know you, having to have faith in taking what you now have experienced and what you now know versus what the majority of people have come to assume and to believe about you. And that can really be a real matter of faith, because we are a pack species and we don't like to be singled out, or we don't like to hold an idea that singles us out or has us kind of alone. And so this pressure to march to the beat of the majority's drum is really a real thing. And I have people who I've come into contact with in life who have certainly had very powerful experiences, very powerful personal experiences that they hold dear to their heart as it relates to God, but are still willing to be in allegiance to things within their religion that may even contradict what they know personally about God, because of that battle between the ego self and spirit. Like the part of me that is very human wants to just be with my people and be on whatever page they're on.
Mm-hmm.
That spirit is standing in this truth that is in a category all by itself. And I think that it takes a lot of maturity, it takes a lot of faith, it takes a lot of brave heart to be able to kind of hold on to that. I like what Apostle Paul said about evolving beyond the elementary teachings, that we have to be willing to climb up the emotional scale, and we can't make our journey about what grandmama holds dear in her heart. We can't make our journey about what the tradition of the family, and we can't make it about carrying on a legacy. We have to carry on a legacy based upon the truth as we ourselves know it to be, not based upon culture or tradition. Secondly, you just said, my goodness, I should have wrote it down. You just said something. What did you touch on, like right before I started speaking?
Dang.
It was, you touched on something that sparked the thought, and maybe it'll come back to me. Probably will.
It'll probably come back.
Anywho,
no big deal.
Right. So, mysticism. Well, before we even get there, because I keep having 101 questions about this religion thing as it relates to you.
It's fine. We got time. I got to beat 10 hours. Don't worry.
So, what in the hell does Jesus? Who do you think? Who is Jesus to you? Here it is. You have their religion saying that this is the truest of the truth. This is the man of the hour, and that this is the way, the life, etc. But you also are a mystic. So what's left of Jesus after this journey of yours? Like, what has been left of him?
Yeah. So
is he just a teacher to you? Is he a Messiah? Is he your Messiah? Is he the God in the flesh? What is he to you?
Those questions carry with them lots of other questions that need to be answered subsequently before I can actually touch on those specifically. But where is Jesus? I'll start with that one. Jesus right now would fall in line with me as an ascended master, like someone who's come before, they've ascended. He quite literally ascended into the clouds, after he rose again. I believe the account of the things he did, like, his walking on water, the healing and the feeding of the 5,000. I believe those things because from a historic standpoint, the historians of the day and the different leaders and the philosophers of that time where Jesus was alive and shortly after, like second and third century, they comment on Jesus. So I know he's a real person. I know that he really did the things that he did. In the writings about him, the real question is the origin of his divinity. It's like if he was actually the son of God and like different topics like this. And so touching on that, is he a Messiah? Do I see him as a Messiah or personal savior? I see him as the person that reconnected me to divinity, reconnected me to God. I don't see God the way that typical Christians do. I don't see God as a father figure or an old man with a beard in the clouds or anything like that. My notion of God is more etheric and more like a consciousness that pervades everything. Because in the Bible, he says, "I am that I am." Um, it's like I am in that, I am here, like I am there. He's omniscient, he's omnipresent, omnipotent. He's in all things, and so thus he would be in this tree, or he would be, in the air. He's everywhere, things like that. So I hold a different notion of God, and so when it comes to Jesus, if he is the Son of God, he is a product, an incarnation of that universal consciousness, that divine source that started everything. I don't want to get like super deep into Gnosticism and the idea that there's a transcendent God.
We are totally here to get deep off into.
Let's do it then. Let's do it then. As far as I've learned, when it comes to Jesus in particular, like I said before, how he was conveying to people, and this might have been what you were talking about, he was conveying to people his experiences with divinity in a way that they could understand. And because the Jewish people had in their minds these different prophecies and things that the Messiah was supposed to fulfill, I believe the Messiah was supposed to be the next king of the Jews. Like he was supposed to be the offspring of David. And, the book of Matthew starts with the whole genealogy of Jesus all the way back to King David in the Old Testament. And, all these different things. And so the Jewish people wanted Jesus to fit this mold, and he was there to do a job specifically. He was there, and he even says it himself. He's like, I'm here to reconnect people. Like I'm the bridge between heaven and earth, that sort of thing. He says to, I think it's either Thomas or Philip, one of the disciples, he says, soon enough, you'll see angels descending and ascending on the Son of Man. Different comments like this, where it's just saying that like he's the connection between heaven and earth for these people. So Jesus to me currently, and it's still an evolving thing. I don't want you to think like I've got it figured out and I'm at the top of the mountain comfortably.
The eternal unfolding.
Yeah, like currently, it's interesting because lots of interpretations of Jesus, and when you tell people that the translations from the Greek to English are a bit flawed and suggestive, they're like, oh no, that's not right. You're like, okay. I mean, when Jesus says, you become, it's like a son of God, he's a son of God, is like the literal Greek translation. And like that changes how you understand it, because he's helping people to become sons and daughters of God, to reconnect with this divine consciousness. So yes, I see Jesus as a savior in that, like he said all the time, like he's being a light to the world, that just bringing light into darkness, saying that, hey, there's something more than what you're experiencing. There's something more than this religious institution that's, peddling piety to you. That's, dropping money into the offering plates, their coins, so to show you how much they're giving and all these different things. There's more to life than the egoic self. There is a spiritual divinity that is inherent within you that you need to get in contact with. And the way that Jesus did that was by showing people what he could do. So if you don't believe on what I'm saying, believe on the things that I have done and that I'm doing. Believe on the miracles themselves, that the things I'm saying hold validity. I feel like where Christians get mixed up is they think that Jesus was the only person that did miracles and that came to preach love and to preach reconnection with divinity. And he's not. And so that caused me to kind of categorize him in line with the other ascended masters. The only difference being he's the one I came to first, and he's the one I have most experience with. So obviously I go through him whenever there's something going on. I have him in mind. I study his teachings. Sorry if that was a long-winded way to answer that question.
You are here to be long-winded. What's interesting about that is I remember when I first, I'm a Christian mystic, but I'm also referred to as a witch, which is a title that I don't mind. All that means is that I'm not mortal and basic like you.
Okay.
I'm fine with the term witch. And I remember when I first started getting into occultism and spiritualism, that a lot of the mystics who were training me, for some reason, were very invested in me giving up Christ. It was like, you're going to have to give up Jesus at some point.
One or the other, man. Yes.
And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not giving up my baby daddy. Like, Christ is like, he's my first love. And it's 333. I just caught that. He's my first love. And my first love affair with God is through the New Testament and through my relationship to Christ. And that's something that I've never been able to divorce myself from. And it's not a relationship that I ever had an interest in divorcing myself from. What a lot of mystics didn't understand about me as a mystic is that Christ was the very reason why I had the courage and felt comfortable even developing as a spiritualist, because when I looked at Christ, I saw a trillion intersections. Here it is. I saw Christ, who was essentially adopted, really. He had this intersection of coming from somewhere else, being born of something else, but also this human intersection. I thought that was a great intersection for people who had been adopted to be able to identify with Christ in terms of just being raised without your biological father, which Christ did not have his biological father. In fact, he had a step parent. Also being raised up poor and impoverished. It was a kind of a mockery to be a carpenter. Even the Pharisees and all of their piousness was like, who is this man that the son of a carpenter? My God, and so there was like, wow. So there was this representation of also the poor or the lesser man who was also reflected in Christ. Here also was a man who he himself could be considered a eunuch because he did not per se marry or participate in sex, which could lead to a lot of assumptions about Christ's sexuality, especially with him living out in the woods and traveling with this harem of men, and they're washing each other's feet and kissing. There's lots of notions that I can produce. And I look at this. I mean, even there's a text in the scriptures that talks about Christ not even, some people interpret it as it meaning Christ was not physically attractive, that he wasn't that he wasn't eye candy per se. And I said, you know what? This would be the way that a God who's coming for the heartbroken of the world, this is the way that God would show up.
Oh, absolutely.
He wouldn't show up as Brad Pitt. He wouldn't show up
right.
as Denzel Washington in his prime. He would show up unattractive, poor, seemingly weak and passive, challenged by every conventional standard,
unaccepted,
like unaccepted, outcast. That of course this would be a loving God's incarnation, and out of that, the total liberation and the total like full circle of self-love and God's love and purpose and personal empowerment. I mean, this is really a epic story of the underdog becoming the dog of all dogs. And here it is, we watch Christ shed the skin and challenge society as it was at a time. And I remember in my mysticism, a lot of people have come to me over the years and have stated, well, how have you been able to, practice magic and the law of attraction and etc., but also be a self-proclaimed Christian? What does that mean about the Muslims? What does it mean about the pagans? What does it mean about the atheists? And I used to always tell them that, you guys are looking at Christ at face value. That Christ's message was to be a stimulating mystery. And to me, Christ on a metaphysical level, it's just the vehicle that we're all traveling to come into that self-actualization. Now, for religious-minded left-brain people, they need it to be called Christ. And this is much deeper than vernacular, as you said. This is much deeper than vocabulary. We're talking about people unfolding and becoming exposed to themselves from the inside out. And that is has nothing to do with language than it does awareness. And so when I think about Christ, the way, the life, and the truth, I'm thinking that anything that brought me to my cross was Christ. Whatever my cross was, whether it be my privilege as a man, my patriarchy, my misogyny, like my crosses can be different things, my self-loathing, my superiority, my narcissism. Like that cross represents the confrontation between you and the thing that's prohibiting you from expansion, and not running away from the boogeyman, but confronting him, whatever your boogeyman is for you. And we all have our cross to bear. Christ said, pick up your cross and follow me. My cross as Christ is being different and being ostracized and being victimized and villainized as a result of not walking in the traditional orthodox way in which the rest of the powers that be do. And Christ is also the thing that brings you to that love. Like for some people, like Christ is the dark night of the soul. Christ is the ego death on the cross. Like for some people, for some women, they found Christ through a miscarriage. Like some of the most painful experiences of our lives have been the most transformative. My divorce for me was one of the most transformative experiences in my entire life. Something that hurt me and obliterated me and felt like a curse to me eventually became something that I found my salvation through. And so Christ represents the strength, the ego death, and the liberation from that ego death, and therefore making your torturer now becomes your remedy. The very thing that pained me is now my testimony. It's the very reason why I'm here before you today, as dripping divinity, as a vibrating expression of the universe. And I came through the pain and the hurt and the destruction and the heartbreak and the betrayal of my life, all things that we see in Christ's walk. And so my issue with today's version of Christ is that, for one, religion has fluffed up spirituality. Spirituality has been the most difficult thing I've ever had to do in my fucking life, okay? Spirituality almost took my head the fuck off. Like, this has not been some beautiful watering of a rose. Like, I was a rose in a concrete jungle. Like, I had to be watered and fight through this crap in my life, but it's also been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. There are things that you experience and things that you obtain and you become aware of that you just couldn't without putting your ego aside, that you just couldn't without putting your cynicalism aside, that you just couldn't without putting your fear and your hurt and your insecurity aside. So I don't think that people, what I don't like about religion is they've made Christ a specific destination, and Christ is, but Christ is also all of the strange moving parts that just moves you into alignment and self-fulfillment. I believe that Christianity is all of the world's religions, and all of the world religions that it's all the same. That these are just modes of transportation to the divine. Whether you find Christ through Allah, whether you find Christ through the light of Buddhism, whether you find Christ through the self-actualization of the New Age, that it doesn't really matter if you're traveling in a BMW or a Toyota or a Pinto, you're going to the same destination. And maybe some modes of transportation make the journey easier than others, but nonetheless, your mode of transportation, if functional, gets you there.
If functional.
It may be big, like you might have got there 5 hours ahead of me because you was able to press the turbo on the back of the Ferrari. I had to take my time in my Pinto that had a raggedy wheel, you know, hard transmission.
But I made it though.
Issues, you know, maybe atheism wasn't the best route to self-actualization. But what's even interesting about atheism is that atheism has set so many people free who were bound by religion. And there'll be religious people who would tell you that it's wrong to be an atheist. And I say, anything that brings you peace and anything that aids you in being a better woman or a better man is the journey of Christ. And that also includes atheism. That also includes atheism. Now,
sometimes it needs to happen.
It has. Look, there's the climbing the emotional scale. Okay. Sometimes we journey through a lot of lesser evils before we finally get to a good, because some of us can't make an evolutionary leap from one thing to the other. So it's about building and ascending and evolving slowly, but for surely. And so there are lots of people who are afraid for their atheist relatives. And I'm just like, look, that was one step away from the bondage of religion. Just let them continue to evolve. Don't try to indoctrinate them or force anything down their throat. Just because the scriptures also say you shall know the fruit.
Right.
You should know the spirit by
their fruit. Yeah.
The question is not, what do you hold responsible for becoming better? What you are to observe is the better. This person is better. And I'm just going to stand and rejoice of that.
Yeah, they're closer to the mark, right?
But you're better. You are better as an atheist than you were a Christian.
Yeah.
You are better as an atheist than you were a Muslim. When you was Muslim, you was hard, controlling, heavy, a mess. When you were a Christian, you were confused, conflicted, struggling, homophobic, misogynistic, out of your mind. Letting go made you a better person. So for me, other people can't see the Christ in that. To me, all of that, because the devil would never aid you in being a better human being. That's that is God. Beyond theology, beyond religiosity, the devil, demons, whatever you want to call them, will never aid you in being a better lover.
Yeah, the destructive force, if you'll even call it that. And it's interesting that you bring up
saying, boy, stop.
Hey, the homie.
Y'all check out. Oh man, we got Jody's Corner in the building.
Oh, snap. The homies are coming through.
Team Sis in the building. What's going on? That's an inside joke. What's going on, Jody?
Jody, I heard you got some strong opinions, man.
Oh man, Jody is a character in and of himself, man. I love Jody's Corner. Anywho, you guys subscribe to Jody's Corner and Truth Seeker, two dope content creators in the chat.
Very dedicated guys.
So for you, get into a little bit of your mysticism. Like, tell us about some of these strange, bizarre, paranormal activities. Experiences of yours. What have been some of your most strangest experiences, or most like, what the fuck encounters?
Okay. I have to say, Well, I'll just tell you my first out of body experience, because it was really one of the weirdest, and it took so damn long to facilitate. It took now not everyone is going to be improficient as I was, but it took me like 2 years to finally get it. From the moment I was like, I'm going to start doing this and practicing, 2 years later. I mean, there was like some off and on in between there, but it took a while. But when it finally happened, it was a mixture of, like I was saying earlier, self-hypnosis. Specifically, since I do coach astral projection, I like to tell people specifically what I do, because I don't have anything that's really paid for. Like, there isn't like a package I offer. I just like giving people information. I hate information that's like locked up that people can't access. It's not, it's not conducive for everyone, because I've had people from all walks of life all over the globe come to me like, hey, I don't have the money for this. Like, and so can you help me anyway? And I'll be like, well, of course, like, that's what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
So the self-hypnosis technique I used was the SSILD. It actually means like senses initiated lucid dream, but it's a self-hypnosis technique because it lowers your brainwave frequency from the beta, like we've talked about before, to the alpha, and then to the lower meditative theta state. And it just does it really well. Sometimes just doing that alone has caused me to astral project. So the process, if you don't mind me going into the process of how to do it. So if you were curious to have your first astral projection experience, or if you are learned in the arts and you just want to try something new, if you have a free moment, if you're about to take a nap or anything like that, or right when you wake up after sleep, focus on 3 different things. Now, these 3 things are going to alter your brainwave frequency, and thus it's going to put you into an altered state of consciousness. So the first thing you want to do is close your eyes and focus on the black space behind your eyes. The goal with these techniques is to take your 5 senses from external observation to internal observation. So you'll go from focusing on the blackness behind your eyes for 15 seconds, and then you'll move to listening to the tinnitus in your ears for 15 to 20 seconds. Now, tinnitus in your ears could just be like a mild ringing. If you don't hear any ringing, that's fine. You can just focus intently on what you hear and try to imagine there's a ringing. After that, you want to focus on your extremities. I don't care who you are. If you focus on your fingers, your toes, your hands, you're going to feel a buzzing sensation. You can call that your natural energy frequency. You can call it whatever the hell you want to call it. Just focus on that for 15 seconds and cycle that 4 to 5 times. What you'll notice in doing that, if you do it right before sleep, is that you will most likely pass out while doing that. That's perfectly fine. But what happens is your body continues to do those things as you fall asleep. So some people will have spontaneous out-of-body experience symptoms when they do that. It can happen while they're doing it. It can happen throughout the night. In my case, it happened right after a dream. It was a nightmare in particular. I woke up, and before I could move, I was actually going to roll over and get out of bed. And the moment I started to move, I was frozen. And I had sleep paralysis. And we can talk about sleep paralysis a bit later. I've had lots of experience with sleep paralysis, lots of weird things. I woke up and I was feeling the vibrations. And before that, I had never felt them. Everyone always said, you're going to feel vibrations. It's going to be like a buzzing sensation. This was like being on like an Apollo rocket. This was like I was taking off into space. I was on the giant drop. It was horrifying how powerful these vibrations were. And I'm laying in bed. My eyes are open. I'm like, I can't move. I don't know what's going on. I'm feeling this vibration. My heart is like beating out of my chest. Never felt anything like this before. And it keeps ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. It's like, whoa, 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 just going and going. And I think to myself, if this keeps going, I'm going to die. Like this can't keep happening. I'm going to die if this continues. It's like, you get to that point where you're like, I'm tough. I can handle this. And then something keeps happening. You're just like, I can't handle this. Like this has to stop. And so that it got to that point, and the next thing I experienced was this feeling of something grabbing my shoulders and pulling me off the bed. I didn't know I had astral projected yet. I didn't know I had left my body yet. I just thought this sensation I was feeling was so intense that I fell off the bed. At the time, I was sleeping on a mattress on a floor, and there was nothing. There was no headboard, so there was just space behind me. So I thought I had rolled out of bed or something. I was like, man, that was crazy. I get up, walk around the room a little bit, and then I turn and I look at the bed and I see myself sitting there and I'm like contorted, like I'm in pain. And I was like, oh my God. I get in close to myself. I'm like, holy shit, I did it, and I then proceed to move throughout my house. I had an obsession with Doctor Strange and Dr. Manhattan, like my two favorite comic book characters. Dr. Manhattan, when he first appeared after recreating himself in the Watchmen movie, like, we had talked about before, he like appears and he's like blue and glowing and like floating in the kitchen. So I was like, I got to go do that. And so, I float through my house and I just have fun kind of doing that whole thing. But that was like the first mystical experience I had. That was a combination of, like I said, that self-hypnosis technique, listening to binaural beats, and just raw desire. Like, that's one of the main things that'll cause people who've never had an OBE to have one. And I venture to say that there are going to be people that have out-of-body experiences tonight or within the next several days just from hearing about the stories that we tell about it. That's how powerful the spoken testimony is that someone has. Like, it'll just inspire you. And inspire means like inspirited, like you're filled with the spirit. And so after that initial encounter, for 2 weeks, I believe, after that, I astral projected every day. And it was like spontaneous. I would wake up and I'd be floating in my room. I'm just like, oh, this is fun. I'd wake up and I'd roll over and I'd be out of my body. And I'd be like, I have things to do today. So let me like fit back into myself so that I can get to the day. It was like I broke the seal. And since then, like 2012 was my spiritual awakening. But since then, it has been like, I was seeking that. I was seeking more telepathic abilities. Like I encountered people who could see into the future, which is, it's really like when people say things like that, you're just like, oh, this person is absolutely stupid. But when someone tells you an experience that they had apart from monetary gain, why else would they be telling you? Unless they're just like crazy. But my mentor wasn't crazy. He had like a steady job. He was a good person and he could read minds. And I would meet people who would tell me things about myself that no one else knew. And so it led me down this road of crazy mystical happenings. And the preceding year, I had my first encounter with an angelic entity.
Hello, please. I've had quite a few encounters in my 34 years.
I haven't had many.
That's
but
fine.
the one that I've had was enough for the time being, especially. It was the same thing. It was just like a random night. I had just woken up from a dream. I was getting up to get ready. And as I was getting up off the couch, I was rolling over to kind of get off the couch I was sleeping on. I saw this. It was like a figure of a person pacing back and forth in my living room. And I could only see the features of this person because it was like if you took the Invisible Man and you like sprinkled glitter on him, and he was shimmering and shining. So I could see his features, like his jawline and his like cheekbones and his forehead because they were shining. And they're like sparkling like diamonds, and I looked over at him and I was immediately just struck because like there's an interesting sort of fear you get when you're in the presence of things like that, where it's like it's not like horror, but it's like awe. It's like, oh my God, what the hell is happening right now? And it was a mixture of both for me because I didn't know that there wasn't someone just in my house late at night. So I was worried, like, oh my God, is there someone in my house that I need to, I gotta do something about this. and the person was saying something, pacing back and forth. You're saying, we are temples for the living God. We must be holy as he is holy. And he was just reiterating this over and over again. Like, we're holy, we must be holy. And it noticed that I was staring at it after a while. Like, it had been doing that for some time, I imagine. But it noticed me and it looked over at me. And I could see like the shining features of it as it turned. And it teleported from across the room, just in a blink, and it was right next to me, right on top of me. And it said, "You are a son." And it took its hands and it slammed its hands down on me. And I felt, the same vibration sensation I was feeling when I first astral projected. You could take that and like ramp it up times 100. Like, this was like 1,000 volts of electricity, like I'm going to die. That's a common feeling I get sometimes when these things happen, because it's just so intense. The body just doesn't know what to do with it. And it said, you are a son. And it was like, you will run to heaven. And I don't tell people this story specifically because it will make me come off as absolutely insane. But it said you will run to heaven, and these vibration sensations picked up so much so that I started to levitate off of the couch. And I didn't really have a grid for what was happening at the time, but as I lifted off of the couch, I just started screaming my head off. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if I was going to heaven, or I didn't know what was going on. But I moved up to the ceiling and I hovered there at the ceiling. And I think it was because there was there was obvious trepidation in me. Like I didn't want to go any further. I didn't know what was going on. So I stopped. I kind of like moved around the room in that same like horizontal posture a little bit, came back over the couch and back down onto the couch. And I just laid there until the sun came up. Wow. And, some people have asked, like, were you out of body when that happened? Was that like physical?
Whether I was in the body or out of the body?
Honestly, I don't know. You can believe whatever you want. I mean, there are stories that people have levitated before. It really doesn't matter to me. The experience to me is all the same. Like it happened either way to me. So I laid there, and it was from that moment I was like, okay, I've been griping and moaning at God to have a crazy experience like this for a long time. Now that I have one, I've got to take this spirituality thing much more seriously. And I feel like it was that instance that
that was the explosive.
Oh yeah, I was like
awakening.
Yeah, I had a totally different view on the Bible, on encounters with beings, on my standing in this like reality that we're in right now. And from there, I just kind of took things more seriously as far as meeting new people, embracing what people told me. If it was weird, I'd be like, oh yeah, I get you. Like, I know, I know weird things happen. Yeah. And, I just kind of take that and run with it.
Yeah. You had a kind of a similar, well, yours is way more dramatic than mine. But
it's the only one. I haven't seen him very much past that. It hasn't been like that one since. I don't know if I can take it.
I've had two notable angelic encounters in my life. One is kind of similar to yours. And I've spoken about this on my channel before, but I was 18 on my way to another county to look at a vehicle that was for sale, because my parents had bought me a vehicle where they had given me some money to get my first car with. And I ended up taking my cousin's car. She had loaned me her car because she had to work that day. She couldn't take me herself. So I just ended up driving to Orangeburg, which is like, I think over an hour away from where I am. And like midway into my journey, to make a long story short, something appeared to me in my back seat, and I saw it from the rearview mirror, and it communicated with me telepathically and said that you are about to experience an accident, but you will go unscathed and unharmed, and you are loved. And when I looked into the back seat to look at it, because I was looking at it through the rearview mirror, as soon as I looked back, the moment I looked back, the right front tire of the vehicle exploded, and I ended up like rearing off of the road into this incline, and the entire front windshield just shattered, and like literally all of this glass exploded all over me. I walked away from that incident unscathed, unharmed, not a single something was aware that I was going to have an accident and informed me that I was going to have an accident.
Hey, don't worry. You're going to have an accident right now, but you're going to be okay. All right, bye.
I'm gonna be okay.
Much more intense. What do you mean? It's insane.
When I was 16, I had another very strange encounter. I was walking to my cousin's house, and I was coming around this curve, and this really, really petite, really gentle, white, silver-haired woman, she kind of stopped in the middle of the road, and she called my name. She said, Davian, would you like a ride? I didn't know this heifer from the can of paint on the wall, but for some reason, I said, sure. And I got into the vehicle. Now, where I was walking was like, I can't explain, like the sidewalk was curved. So if you were driving it, you had to like curve around it. As her and I were pulling off in the vehicle, mind you, I was only a block away from my destination. It really didn't even make sense for me to get in the vehicle with her. Really, I could have just walked to where I was, but for some reason, I felt comfortable getting in the car with this woman.
You might have got snatched away.
Look, no, I was going to die, because as we were pulling off, there was a semi truck that was coming in the opposite lane. Do you know that semi truck actually ran up on that curb? And had I not got in the vehicle with her, that truck would have ran me over, because I would have been walking that sidewalk at the time that she pulled up and offered me a ride. Had I not been in her vehicle, I would have got hit.
That's it.
The entire semi truck literally jumped the curb. I would have been dead.
Yeah, that's it. They've been watching out for you, man.
Not only that, this woman took me to my destination. She also said my mother's name and asked me how my mother was doing. Said she was doing fine. This woman knew my relatives by name.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think to get her name or to even ask her who the hell she was until she had dropped me off and left.
I
never saw this woman again. I had never seen this woman prior. I haven't seen this woman since. And the fact that she pulled up exactly at that point in time and offered me a ride is no short of coincidence. And that, my God, I am willing to bet everybody's life watching this stream that was certainly not even a human being.
That's nuts. It's like they just got a call or something. Say, hey, pick up the homie. Oh, okay, yeah. Here he is right here.
So let me ask you this question, because this has been something that's kind of been speculated. Why do you think some people have had angelic interventions while other people have kind of died in their distress?
That's a difficult question, simply because sometimes the answering of it is it gratifies the ego of a person specifically, but sometimes I've heard a lot of things. I've heard things like some people have been given chances and they've gotten out of this and they've gotten out of that, and they've been told, hey, turn your life around. And, it's almost like taking a test. You only have 5 minutes left, but you still got like 25 questions to answer. And there's no way you're going to finish it. So they're just like, pull them out. That's sort of, it's a weird way of looking at it, but other people, they take the hint. And it seems like you're someone that takes the hint. So when something is about to happen, they're like, oh, well, he can't die yet. We got other things that we need to do with him. I've heard lots of stories like that. The Bible is riddled with stories like that, where someone is, Peter comes to mind, where he's let out of the jail by the angel, right when he's in there. And he's like, angel's like, hey, come on, you got other stuff to do. Come on out of here. The jail cell opens up and he just walks him back to, whoever's house he was living at. Like angelic visitation in that way is very interesting.
Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, Lot and his family. Yeah,
lots of angelic intervention. I think a few different things are responsible for this. I think our own personal alignment can be one, obviously, but I think also principalities, and I would put angels in the same category as principalities, actually have dominion over certain regions and areas of the country and the state and the city. And sometimes when people get saved or rescued, it's just because they happen to be in proximity to a watcher or to a angelic principle that is neighboring the area, and responding to that energetic frequency. I also think that bloodlines is another, because I know that angelic presence in my family is very heavy. My grandparents, my aunts, my uncles have had a lot of experiences with what one might come to define and call angels. And so I think that there are principalities and spirits and energies that are connected to us for whatever reason, due to our heritage, due to our bloodline, relationships that humans have made to metaphysical beings, deities that are attached to the family for whatever reason. I know that this is really big in hoodoo and voodoo as it relates to bloodlines and spirits kind of traveling generationally. Even in paganism, witches typically have a familiar, the spirit that you can use for protection work, also to do your bidding with, but is also a spirit that can be transferred or kind of given to your child, to another practicing witch within the family, etc. And so there's lots of different variables, but I've always found that particularly interesting. Now, when you started coming out of your body, having remote viewing, like, what did that teach you about the nature of reality? I mean, like, what? So this is my thing, right? With metaphysics. I don't know a lot about a lot of other mystics, but spirituality didn't just change my worldview. It changed me emotionally. It changed me as a person. Has metaphysics and these experiences with the other side, like, how have they shaped you as a man? Aside from just obviously your awareness that you are not your body, that there is other attributes of consciousness aside from what the five senses convey to us. How has it penetrated you or shaped you in any other way?
It definitely has in that way, specifically like the bending of, and breaking of paradigms. But at the same time, I feel like it's altered the way I see other people. Much of the way I act is, I don't want to say it's like responding to other people, but it's with other people in mind. Having experiences like what you describe, some of the experiences that I've had, they kind of open me up to this idea that we are like a universal consciousness experiencing itself in different bodies. And, like I said before, like we are just the aperture by which the universe experiences itself. So just that alone causes me to try to act in a more just and honorable way with people, because I know that any act of love towards someone else is an act of self-love, because they're just me in a different body experiencing their own perception of reality. And I feel like it also takes away that materialism, especially like having these experiences. It's like, well, I can do all this cool stuff and have all this fun, but like there's more to this life than like the cars and the mansions and the parties and all the fun and all that other stuff in this 3D reality. And so it definitely, for me at least, it took away that desire for materialism, because at one point in my life I was searching for, if not spiritual power, monetary and influential power over the world. Because I wanted to feel special, I wanted to feel important. And in the capitalist version of this world, you're not important and powerful and renowned unless you have capital, unless you have money, unless you have sway over cultures and you have influence over people and things like that. So I wanted one or the other, because I didn't want to feel forgotten. Like I didn't want to be a nobody, essentially. But the more experiences of that caliber that I had, the more I began to see that like everything that happens on this earth, everything that happens in this reality seems more like a play. People call it the cosmic drama. Like we're just playing a role, This is like, I don't feel like playing the role today. Like I'm just going to be me. I'm just going to enjoy living. I'm not going to be a member of this show today. I'm going to try to transcend beyond that, that enlightenment sort of experience. So I feel like it did a lot of that for me, especially. And it did a lot of the perspective shifting and reality bending. Like it really opened me up to that.
Yeah. So I know that recently, like you did a video, which I thought was really refreshing because you touched on how a lot of people can be kind of like spiritual enthusiasts, is what I like to call them, and kind of develop an interest in spirituality and metaphysics kind of out of the ego, which people don't think typically goes together. When you think about spirituality, you think of, you know, somebody who's really searching holistically, but people don't know that even the ego can hijack one's interest even in spiritual things. And you talked about kind of coming from a place where you realize that a lot of your initial interest in metaphysics came from this place of disempowerment in your life and feeling disempowered and kind of wanting to kind of superpower yourself through these abilities as a way to feel powerful or to feel in control. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about kind of what even created that wound and that hole in you to begin with? Like, where did that begin?
I think it began fundamentally, and I feel like it happens like this for a lot of people, but it happens very young, where you begin to realize that not everyone is going to be important or valuable. So you get this sense that if not everyone can be valuable, then it's a competition for importance and for happiness in a way. And so I always grew up very competitive because I felt like if I wasn't competing, if I wasn't number one, I didn't mean anything. Perhaps, I guess you could extrapolate that out to be the product of growing up without like a father figure and, you know, the validation of that and seeking assurance and acceptance from different groups and different gangs and different things like that. But at the same time, that drove me to seeking spirituality. So I guess I'm not mad at it. At the end of the day, the more experiences you have like this, and the more you start to experience these mystical states and realities, you start to see that everything happened for a reason. It's like, oh, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. But it was those places of hurt, places of being outcast, a majority of the time being outcast, being bullied. I was bullied quite a lot growing up. And so it made me want to just be strong. So I got into martial arts, and I was like, I have to build myself. I have to be strong, you know, so that when people pick on me, I can fight back, you know. At first, it was self-preservation. And then it was self-fulfillment. And, you know, but even in those things, it's okay to have those motivations when you're going into spirituality, because something has to get you to spirituality. But those motivations have to fall off at a certain point, because they in themselves are limiting. They're very low vibrational. They're very survivalist mindset. And as long as you're just trying to survive, thriving is going to be impossible, because you're living in a state of lack. Every decision you make is empty. Like, I don't have enough. Scarcity. Like, I can't trust anyone because I've been hurt so much. Until you transcend those negative and hurt emotions, and you move yourself into a place of receiving the love and abundance of the universe, then you won't ever be able to move out of that. But that is definitely what got me to spirituality, that place of hurt, that place of revenge. Like, I want to have this power so that I can. I was real silly. I told you Dr. Manhattan was one of my favorite characters. One of the things I love so much about his character. And I don't want to get super deep into that movie because I'm a bit of a movie buff for the movies I've seen.
Okay. Right, exactly.
For the movies I've seen. And I still haven't seen Stigmata. I got to watch that one. But the other two I've seen. I know a lot about those movies now. You see?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I got them. You see, now you have nothing on me. I got them.
Right. He's seen the craft, you guys, and he's seen the bell finally. Okay.
Don't hate me. I've seen it.
Right.
I've seen it. But one of the main things I liked so much about Dr. Manhattan's character was that he was alien. Like, he wasn't human anymore. And throughout the movie, his whole character arc, his development, was that he was becoming more and more detached from reality, to the point where he just goes to Mars. He's just like, I'm done with Earth. I'm done with these people. And he's like, I'm tired of being like caught up in the tangle of their lives, he says. And that appealed to me so much because I was tired of being hurt and lonely and upset and feeling weak. And I was like, I'm tired of this. I just wish I didn't have these emotions. And it was actually that frame of thought that led me into a meditation of it. I haven't seen any practice on this particular type of meditation, but I decided one day I was going to sit in darkness and I was going to meditate on all the things that made me angry, which is really silly practice, thinking back on it, of course. But I wanted to focus on all of those things. And my hope was that I would just ball them all up and I would just throw them all away. Like anything that upset me, I just wanted to shut off that emotional switch. Like if you've seen Vampire Diaries, I wanted to cut off the humanity switch. I was trying to be done. After that meditation, I remember passing out immediately, and I had the scariest dream to date that I have ever had. And it was in direct response to the way I was thinking at that time.
Yeah.
I woke up in a different room of the house that I was living in, and I knew something was wrong. I was like, oh, this isn't right. But it looked real. Like it was crisp, like 4K resolution. Like it was the clearest I've ever seen. And I was like, oh, it's strange that I'm up here. I shut the TV off. Like I was in the basement before. How did I get up here? And I hear crying coming from a hallway. So I step out into the hallway, look toward where the bathroom would be, where the crying was originating. And there was a bed in there. It was a bedroom. And so I was like, oh, this is strange. But it looked so real and it felt so real that I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, what have I missed? How long have I been asleep? Like, what's going on here? And there was a girl on the bed. Like there were two girls there. One of them was crying and, little kids, like two little girls. And she was writhing around, banging around, crying. And I say, I'm like, hey, are you all right in there? Like, is everything okay? And she stops crying and she sits up, like you'd imagine a vampire to sit up. She sits up right off and looks at me, and her eyes are completely black. And they're empty and they're soulless, just full black. And within a second, she hops over the bed and on top of me, and she's like wrestled me to the ground with these huge claws, and her mouth is doing the typical, Conjuring movie elongation, and like her eyes are pitch black. She's got these like claws and these sharp teeth, and like I'm fighting this thing, this little girl. I'm fighting her, and I'm like, I can't stop what's happening here. And it was real to me in that moment. It was totally real. And this little girl comes up to me. She's about to, I guess, like bite my head off, like bite into my neck. And then she stops and she whispers, "Is this what you want?" And then the dream ends. And I wake up, I wake up like Wolverine. He's like screaming and yelling all the time. I wake up like that, pitch black. I'm sweating. And from then on, I resolve like, okay, getting rid of emotions is not the ticket. So I'll just switch over to trying to get ultimate power so that I can exact my revenge. I just kind of just changed the dial a little bit, I was way off topic, but you said you're here for the other topic. So
what did you make of like the question? Like, what did that mean to you? Did you ever?
I tossed that thought around in my mind a lot, especially right after the event. But it was that what I was doing, the line of thought I was going down, was going to lead me to a place where this darkness in me was going to consume me, is what I took from that. If I keep filling my mind and sowing the seeds of rage and anger in my mind, I was only going to get fruits of anger and rage, and they were going to destroy me. And so I had to turn my attention away from that. Did I do it successfully? Not necessarily. Things take time, but it led me to the mysticism that I know today. And like I said in that video, it's something that you have to let go eventually. It's hard though, because pain and suffering is addictive. Because in that, it gives you a sense of uniqueness. It's like, I'm so hurt, like, I'm so lonely, I'm so abused, and you become that identity. So the thought of letting that go and healing from those hurts and those wounds is like an ego death, because you are those things, you are those traumas, and you live predominantly with the majority of your energy in the past. And what I said in that video was that when it comes to manifestations and creating the reality you want, most people don't succeed because a majority of their energy is locked up in the past, and it's locked up in a fearful future that they've created.
Yeah.
So they're living those two realities. So they don't have enough energy to create the reality that they want. And the only way to create the reality that you want is to pull your energy back to you, to recall it from those traumatic memories and who you think you are, and just exist in the moment, which is why mindfulness meditation is extremely powerful, because you're not thinking about the past. You're not worrying about the future. You're just in the now. Buddhists call it the eternal now, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The ego is about the love of power, and being whole is about the power of love. And what I've come to understand is that a lot of people are more fear bound and live their lives from a more of a place of fear and insecurity and egotism, because they haven't had a true and genuine experience of unadulterated love. If there's anything that I would encourage believers or seekers to do, especially as it relates to counteracting fear in your life, or counteracting insecurity and woundedness in your life, is if you pray and seek anything, don't pray and seek for power, or don't pray and seek for control or something superficial. Pray for an experience of true love. It will change you on a molecular level to experience that love. When me and you spoke in our interview, and I spoke about my ayahuasca experience, that was my gateway to that love, and that love changed my life. That love gave me a love for life. I was a rather morbid person.
Yeah.
I never knew it before my ayahuasca experience, but I really romanticized death. I was kind of very disconnected and disinterested in the living experience. Like, you know, I mean, I wouldn't have fought to be. I remember when my appendix ruptured, and my friends and my family were so scared for me. They was like, "Oh my God, you have to come back." I'm like, and I was sitting there talking to God, like, "Look, am I going? Like, I'm ready. Like, this is the perfect time to like take me. Like,
am I going?
Yeah, like you can take me doing surgery. Like, I mean, I can go so seamlessly. Like, this would be the opportune time to take me like a thief in the night." Because I didn't have a love for life. I was having a very passive experience with living. But after my ayahuasca experience, and after experience, and just because one of the things that happened in that transcendental psychedelic experience was the destruction of my ego. Once my ego was destroyed temporarily, I was able to have an unfiltered experience of love. Because even when you're loved here as a human being, you are more than likely experiencing wherever that love is coming from, whether it's your church family or your biological family or your spouse or your children, whatever it is, it's being filtered, rationalized, etc., through the ego self. And you can experience an even really impressive, profound sense of love, even when the ego is at work, filtering it through your conscious mind. But there is nothing comparable to the experience of that love when your ego is temporarily suspended. That is, I mean, the best way that I could put it is like the difference between like the little hits of rain you get carrying an umbrella versus just letting that umbrella down and allowing that drench. And that is something that stays impressed and ingrained into your psyche and your soul for the rest of your life. And so out of that experience, for me, just came a real love for life. It also came a courage that I didn't have. Because once I knew I was loved, I was able to allow a person to put a gun to my head and say, "You just better be clear that you want to pull the trigger." Because the one in front of the gun is the one who's gonna live forever.
Indeed.
There ain't no distinction between the living and the dead for me. There is no death. Is just another type of living.
Transition, yeah.
Yeah, like my ayahuasca experience made it clear that I was eternal and that I was immortal.
And now you've done it.
Also, when we was talking on your platform, you guys have to go and watch the interview on Cal's platform. That was a great interview. But I always talk to people about their faith, and kind of just working at your relationship to God, because that love gives you the heart to boldly go where your ego will never survive and where your ego would never allow you to. And I was impressed by your last video about seeking spiritual things for the right reasons, because that's something that a lot of spiritual teachers don't teach. They do teach the gifts first. They do teach the experiences. And I've seen people lose their minds attempting to have experience before they were grounded in their humanity.
I've heard of that as well. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, I've heard people have had wonderful transcendental experiences and came back even more depressed because they didn't even know how to cope between the contrast of that experience and,
or they just weren't ready for the experience. Like that's
and because you can be taught the abilities before you have been matured as a person. This is what creates the opportunity for people to become left-hand paths, because I don't have to address your narcissism or your abusive psychology or your ego, and I'll just teach you method and give you access to things that then you will use for the sake of either harming yourself or harming someone else. But also, you'll miss the point of even having these abilities, which is not for the sole purpose of gratifying your ego, but every ability and gift and experience is offered to you so that you can use it to amplify your community and to make the world a greater place. So grounding students in that self-love, working them through all of their trauma, their bullcrap, their insecurity. For me, that's where I start first, because I don't want you missing or misconveying the point here. The point is not coming out of your body to just go peer through the universe. At the end of the day, being in your ego can allow you to do a lot of things in vain. Love is purpose, and love gives purpose. And so it's not about just existing and living for the sake of existing, or being psychic for the sake of being psychic, or like looking at these things as some type of an edgy attribute to your identity, but furthering your own awakening, and then taking the way that is shaping you and how that's molding you as a person, and just offering that back to everyone else who is asleep. So that leads me to my next big question. Why the fuck do you think God did all this? Why are we here, Cal? Why are we here? Why are you here? Why was this done? Why are we on Earth? Why do we have bodies? What are we doing here? What is the purpose of our lives? What is the purpose of society? What is the purpose of all of this? Why would something do all of this? What is the purpose of suffering? What is it? What's going on here?
Okay. You've got a knack for asking some very powerful questions in succession.
But you know what? Before you answer that, I think this is important too. If you want to ever become a great teacher, you have to be a student who asks really poignant questions. Never seek or have questions of substance or curiosities of substance. And we usually take the laziest approach to life, which is why it's easier to adopt a religious theology rather than to seek spirit or to exist within yourself and come to understand what the purpose of things are. Like, it's easier for us to just adapt to these pre-existing conditions and institutions of learning, because that's just the most convenient thing to do, rather than to figure it out yourself.
Yeah, it's fast food.
Most of us don't have challenging questions. We don't have challenging notions. We don't have stimulating responses or stimulating questions either, because we're walking around very based, very low level. And so if you really want to grow, ask the universe and ask spirit questions that provide answers that will confound you, that will challenge you, because the truth is just that, confounding. And if you are, but you also have to be in a place where you let go of the ego, so that you don't have no bias or prejudice about whatever the truth may be, because it may be very different than what you could have ever imagined to be. And the only way to get there is to wipe your slate clean, that reborn again thing, that repentant again. All repentance means is to think about what you're thinking about. Be a conscious observer of your thoughts. Be aware. Don't necessarily identify with them, but just be aware of your thinking. Probe yourself. Be investigative of yourself. Why do I think this way? Why am I this way? Why am I scared? Why does this make me happy? Why does this make me sad? Why do I do this habit? Where do these things come from? And go down the rabbit hole of self. Almost do a spiritual forensic test on yourself. And don't be afraid to embark upon that journey, because what you will find is that 99.9% of who you are is what the world you respect desires of you. It's not even you. Most Christians never ever ask themselves or think about the fact that they never actually chose Christianity for themselves.
Yeah, it was something passed down to them. It was inherited through culture, through family, definitely. And like you said about it being easy, like it's, people don't have pointed questions or pointed answers or have the deep debates and conversations because they haven't reached that place of spiritual maturity. Like babies don't wonder about where their next all beef meal is coming from. No, they're worrying about the baby formula. They're worried about the milk. So it's like, I think it's definitely a spiritual maturity to ask really difficult and deep questions. And yeah, like I was just thinking, like, religion makes spirituality like a drive-through, like it's a fast food spirituality. And so you don't really have to cook it. You don't have to know anything about it. You just accept it. You're just being force-fed, basically. So like I said, you ask very pointed questions, one after the other. So I've got to break them up. Good questions, though. For the first, why is this happening? Why are we having this experience like this? I'll just be honest with you. I don't know. I ask myself that a lot. And that's something that you continually ask the more spiritual you become, is like, why are we doing this thing? I can tell you how reality feels to me, I guess. And I'll do it with a story because I like stories very much.
Actually, something interesting is happening before we get to.
No, yeah, that's fine. What's
nature
happening?
Is calling.
Oh, this guy.
Means that what can happen is give me 30 seconds. In that 30-second window, just tell the people, this would be a great commercial break. Tell them where they can find you on social media, Instagram, email. Also tell them about what you offer, because you also are a teacher and you offer a plethora of information to those who are willing. So you give them all of that while I go let nature call.
Gotcha. Okay, I got some music to play. Do your thing, man. So hello all. It's been a pleasure. I like looking at you guys chat over here in this chat. I can see you all. You want to know my thoughts on hell, the devil, and demonic oppression, D-Rock? Oh, very good. I'll definitely talk about that because I like talking about those specific topics like hell, the devil, and I like talking about that specifically. But what I do, I am an astral projection coach and spiritual teacher in that I just basically help you get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. And all a coach really does is try to find the points where you need help and adjust them. Everything I offer is free. I don't want to make free sound like valueless, but it is no cost to you. So all of my videos on my channel go in depth on the experiences that I have, the techniques that I use. So over at the Melkez channel, you can find all of my stuff there. I've got a full 10 video series masterclass for how to astral project and how to have your first astral projection. But most of what I do is just meet with people, talk with them. I do a bit of Reiki. So if you do go to my website and you want to have a one-on-one session with me, I won't only take you through guided meditations, but I'll also give you an auric cleansing, Reiki attuning, and different things like that to help you adjust. But my thoughts on the devil and hell.
Ooh, that's good. That's good.
Someone asked a really cool question.
Of course, D-Rock would ask this question.
D-Rock? Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about hell and the devil.
So I'll start with hell, and then I'll get back to consciousness questions because they may lead into it. It may siphon back into it. Just about to give deep healing message. Have you in my ears? Oh, awesome. Salted. So my idea of hell. Hell is a very interesting topic, but as far as Americans are concerned, hell is just what we learned from the Bible because we are predominantly Christian nation, if you will. Hell in other cultures is something that lasts for a certain period of time. It's something that is karmically based. There are some religions that just believe that you reincarnate, so hell isn't something that you go to and stay there forever. I personally don't ascribe to the idea that hell is a one and done forever, all, you're done for. And the idea that came from like the way it's described in churches today is, I don't want to say it's offensive, but it's gross to me that a good person, a good atheist person will say, because we mentioned atheist people before, an atheist person who is in tune with their own power and their own ability to make things happen. They have a good sense of right and wrong, that lives their life but doesn't profess to be Christian, would go to hell for all eternity by way of what Christians popularly teach. To me, that's like saying that the things that you do in 70 years determines torture and anguish being befitted to you for the rest of eternity. That's absurd. No judge would ever agree to that. So to say that God is a powerful and all-knowing judge means that he's allowing something erroneous to happen. That's absolutely crazy. That's what I think of hell. Hell is, it can either be escape of punishment that you create for yourself because of how you felt about your life. It could be something totally created yourself. If you've ever astral projected before, you know that when you astral project, you can take your thoughts and preconceived notions about what you'll find into the experience. As far as the devil goes.
Before you get to the devil, I want to chime in on the hell. And then after you respond to the devil, I want to respond to the devil too. Hell is an interesting thing for me as well. But so every mystic, as me and Kyle have said here, like has a different leader. My particular leader is Yahshua. So that's my metaphysical teacher. What I find interesting about, of course, religion has hijacked hell and used it as a way to bamboozle people into the church system or into the religious system.
Exactly.
Religion is clever and informed enough to know that most human beings, once again, because most of us are wrapped up in our ego, we have a very visceral response to fear. So fear mongering works. Using fear as a marketing strategy is something that will always work for humanity. We're seeing that now, even with the COVID scenario. However, back to hell. Hell, in my understanding, is an immortal realm. It's not eternal, but it is immortal, which means that while it can exist forever, it also cannot exist forever. This is not the same for things that are eternal. Things that are eternal are grounded principles that are immovable and unstoppable. These are the kind of universal forces that remain for the sake of remaining. There is no alteration of things eternal. They just are. Now, what's fascinating about religion, particularly Christianity or the Abrahamic faiths and hell, is that there's an instance in scripture where Christ dies on the cross and descends into Hades, which was a space that encompassed both hell and a type of paradise that was called Abraham's bosom. Within that dimension, there was something perceived as a great gulf that separated the unrighteous from the righteous. Now, Christ, during his 3-day vacation in the underworld, preached to a lot of the great men of the faith, those who had died prior, etc., and kicked the doors of Hades open and brought these awakened saints out of this dimension into a higher state of God. What the scriptures also say is that Christ not only removed the sting of death, but also took with him the keys of hell. Now, interestingly enough, if you read up on a lot of the near-death experiences that have been reported over the past over the past 2 decades, people have had both near-death experiences in heaven and also in hell. And what's interesting is that people who went to hell in their near-death experience, they all were rescued once they cried out to God, whatever God was to them in that experience. What a lot of Christians don't want to accept is that because, according to Christianity, according to your Bible,
according to
your Bible, not mine, according to your Bible, okay, is that hell is now a temporary holding spot for souls who refuse to liberate themselves through the love of God. Because those doors are still wide open. Those gates are still wide open. Christ took the keys, and the entrance into hell has been open since. Now, a lot of people will say, well, Consciouz, who in the hell would not liberate themselves from hell? Who in the hell would not do what they needed to do to liberate themselves from hell? The same people who are living, who refuse to give up their identity as a victim, are the same people who will go to hell and remain consumed in their victimhood. The same people who are living amongst us now, who have issue after issue and claim they desire help, who refuse to see a counselor, refuse to see a therapist, refuse to do the things that could free them from the bondage of depression and trauma, are the same people who will descend into hell and absolutely refuse to respond.
Just set up camp
to the light of love.
The same, to accept it, yeah.
Now there are people who go to hell, and there are souls that have been there since they've been there, because they refuse to let go of the agony of shame, which is what I find to be so detrimental about shame, because shame will almost lock a person totally into a lower vibratory state and the ways in which people justify harming themselves emotionally and psychologically because they feel ashamed is really incredibly deep. And I can see why people could even feel ashamed of being loved. You ever try to love somebody who suffered from insecurity and they almost acted like a battered animal that every time you got close, they ran, or they pushed you away, or they found some way to leave, to avoid your love, to avoid your affection, to avoid you trying to express intimacy to them. This is how traumatized, very dense souls are responding to the light of salvation. Is while they desire it on one end, they refuse it on the other because they feel too ashamed to be loved. They feel too ashamed to be saved. They feel shame tells you that I deserve the punishment in which I am afflicted with. And while I suffer in my torment and in my agony and in my consequences, I also believe that I deserve them wholeheartedly. And so there are people who bust hell wide open and they stay in that hell, but they are there by way of their own choice. They are there by way of their own willingness. And the moment that any soul can just give up on the shame and the guilt that barricades them to the underworld, it's the moment, just like in all those near-death experiences, where one single cry out to heaven, you get a first responder who shoots into the depth of that abyss and comes to your. But you have to willingly reach for God, because God has already reached for you. That's why the ball will always be in your court. It will never be you waiting on the love of God. It'll never be on you waiting on the protection of God. It'll never be on you having to find. God has already been found. All you have to do is wake up and put yourself on discovery mode. You know how you put your phone and your Bluetooth devices on discovery so that another device can find your device and Bluetooth in? That's what awakening does. It makes us findable. The Apostle Paul says that if you want to get a different result out of your life, then you have to be willing to be lost. Because being found or being in the same place you've been has made you stagnant. And so you're getting the same result over and over and over and over again. You can't break the pattern. Well, you have to be willing to interrupt your own pattern by going against what you naturally would have done, what you rationally would have done, what you typically would have done. And you have to be willing to be your non-typical self in order to experience non-typical results.
Right.
Now, I just wanted to give my little dissertation on hell because I've been holding that.
No, it was fantastic.
I've been holding that in for a minute. Now, the devil.
You said I've been holding that in for a minute. D-Rock was also saying something. I feel like you're going toward. I like you, D-Rock. I like the challengers very much. I think D-Rock is going into more of a dualistic approach because there is good, that there inherently has to be evil. And I do believe in that to a certain degree, because you can't have one without the other, and that's the yin and yang and the balance and all of that. I agree with you, Conscious, on your explanation, your exegesis on hell. That makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, I see the duality of it and this idea that energy itself isn't one way or the other. We did talk before how someone will call it black magic or white magic, or, energy in itself isn't one way or the other, just in the same way that nature isn't good or evil, even though it may send a tornado after someone and nurture a child, in the next moment. It's just how you use it and how you perceive it. And it kind of goes along with what you said, because if that person is locked up in that egoic shame body, then they would keep themselves in a punishment that perhaps they've contrived, or they put themselves in that hellscape because they feel like they deserve it. And if hell is if we're saying that hell is a dimensional place, which I'm totally fine with. I mean, that makes sense to me. I've almost gone there once, and I was like, nah, I'm not trying to have that experience. If it's a dimensional place, then we're assuming that areas where beings are of light and good and of love are higher vibrational. This hellscape is going to be a place that is more lower vibrational. So beings that are vibrating at a lower state with those sort of emotions are going to be dealing with that sort of reality. And accepting that light of transcendence and, you know, that light of salvation is going to move you out of that, you know, because you're no longer clinging to those lower vibrations, those dense vibrational areas. It's an ideal. I'm not saying that's the way it is. I'm just saying that from what D-Rock is talking about, I do see reality as very dualistic in some aspects, but I don't like getting super theological with certain things because theology has a way of tongue twisting itself. And then I just resort back to experience for most things. The devil is much of the same way. I don't think there's a devil under every rock. I don't think there's a demon compelling people to make bad decisions. I feel like there's a demon between people's ears and, you know, battling their spiritual self and their egoic self. And I feel like a lot of people, myself, have that problem with living of the flesh and living in the spirit, you know, two different things. So I feel like that's more what the devil is when it comes to me. If you're more traditional Christian, obviously the devil is a fallen angel and, you know, the war in heaven. And I honestly don't know where that fits into my current worldview of angels warring and different things like that. I believe in it, makes sense, but I don't believe the devil is.
So you say it makes
every
sense.
person.
Like how does it make sense to you?
It makes sense in a thematic way. That there was a war in heaven between these two powers. That's what I mean by dualistic. That's what I'm saying. Like there's a battle between light and dark. So it makes sense that way, that Christianity had to put the dualism in it, like other religions have put their dualism. Like with Hinduism, you've got Kali and you've got Shiva. You know, the duality of it, like the death and of life and things like that. So I can see the war in heaven being that. And I mean, I could go into the story of like the war in heaven and Satan trying to rise to, you know, the upper echelons. Like I'm gonna be higher than the stars and I'm gonna take the seat on the throne. That whole thing. But to me, it just seems like the battle of good and evil that happens. And so Satan represents that inherent pull toward, you know, lack that we have. That pull toward gluttony, toward lust, toward war and anger that exists in us. And so I would call that the devil. Do I believe in angels and things? Obviously, but I don't think the devil, the way that Christians believe it, is on everybody's shoulder. I don't believe Satan or Lucifer is an omnipresent being, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know very well the hierarchy of demons. I did a little bit of demonolatry, but there are demons over demons. There's a structure, but I don't think it's that important.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
D-Rock said earlier that he just doesn't see how people could anchor themselves into hell.
Pun intended, D-Rock. Pun intended.
You can totally see it. Think about every drug addict who is complaining and has their life completely wrecked by their addiction, who refuse to seek sobriety, who refuse to do the work necessary to free themselves from that. Think about obesity. Think about people who, despite knowing that overeating and the emotional woundedness that contributes to overeating that then destroys their physical bodies, see and experience those health issues and complications, and yet still insist upon the addictive practice. It is very clear and very much so evident that human beings, despite the consequences of their actions, can still insist upon destructive behavior, even if they are being destroyed in the process of behavior that they willingly participate in. And this is not a action that is avoided or that becomes no more just because it gets transferred into this idea of an afterlife or the spirit world. People take that same attitude. You take your ego and your will with you into the other side. Like when I astral project, my ego is there too. Like I'm not some divine person that only is able to access pure thoughts. All of my ego is very present. What makes overcoming the ego so honorable is because you have a choice, and what you do with your ability to choose is the things that we find beautiful about human beings. That we make choices as it relates to our gifts. We make choices as it relates to our lives. We make choices as it relates to other people. And when those choices are selfless and serving, we admire that individual because you didn't have to choose what you chose, and you didn't have to do what you did. And yet, for whatever reason, you use your power to choose for yourself, to make a decision that serves the greater good of yourself or your fellow humanity in a given situation. And so what a lot of people hate about healing, and I found this to be true as a healer, is people want emotional, psychological, and spiritual healing to happen the way that it happens in the body. When your body is injured, generally speaking, you get a scab, you get a cut, your body heals without your consent. It does the work for you. What a lot of people don't like about healing emotionally and psychologically is the fact that it's manual labor. You have to get in the wheel, you have to get in the vehicle with your healing to heal. And if you don't take if you aren't self-initiative, if you don't wheel yourself forward, if you don't make commitments to yourself as it relates to your healing, you will die bitter, broken, wounded, and bust hell wide open as a result. Because emotional and psychological and spiritual healing requires you to choose again and 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 again for yourself. Nothing outside of you would do that for you. You have to make the choice. What do you think about that, Kyle? You're mute, brother. I think I can't hear you.
No, I had it muted. There's noise in the background that I'm trying to cut out. I'm glad you said something because I would have forgotten I was muted. But absolutely, it reminds me this idea that healing and pain specifically is addictive because it's easier to stay sad, to stay depressed, to stay empty than it is to make the effort to be whole. If you want to think about pain as a broken limb, or specifically like an arm or a shoulder out of the socket, it's going to hurt. You've got to reset it. You know, it's something that has to be taken care of. It's not something that happens on its own, like you said. Spiritual healing is spiritual and mental healing, like that holistic healing it's an interesting thing because it is definitely needed to progress on the spiritual path. People, and myself included, think that progressing spiritually is how many, I believe Hindus and Buddhists pronounce it like cities, like abilities, like magic, like these paranormal abilities. They think that is progressing spiritually and going down the road of maturation. But progressing spiritually is vibrating at a higher frequency, and the highest frequency of vibration is that frequency of love. It's that the highest point. So you have to move up that spectrum of shame, depression, self-loathing, up to love and adoration and thanksgiving and, you know, joyfulness and things like that. You have to move up to that higher vibrational level, and that takes work, and that's painful because we exist in a world where we constantly get gratification that all there is pain, all there is darkness. So you get comfortable, you get complacent in this place of pain. So when someone says, all right, it's time to feel better, it's time to let that other stuff go and accept that you are loved and that, you know, you have a place and that you are important. It's difficult to accept that. And that's where I feel like the importance of experience comes in, because someone can tell you that you're valuable and that you're loved, and then you have an experience of profound, abounding love, and you'd be like, oh, I see now. I understand. And I was going through I think it was earlier this year or last year, I went through like an intensive 7-hour like counseling session. Because I was in a really bad place, and there were a lot of people there, and they were all chiming in and kind of helping me get through different issues. But it definitely had to happen in order for me to make more progress on this journey that I'm on. It was intense. And so much of the ego is tied to who we think we are in that pain. It's hard to let go of. So I get that. Define ego.
Yeah, I was going to define that.
That's a good one. I would say ego is your perception of self. I think Carl Jung would say ego is one's perception of self, and what's his name? Everybody likes Freud. I think they would categorize ego as your perception of self.
Interpretational ego too.
Hmm?
Eckhart Tolle has a great
Eckhart, yeah.
The ego self, yeah.
But I feel like they would say that ego is your perception of self. Then there's the super ego is like it's like what you aspire to be, is what you want people to see you as. This idea that it's the higher values and traits that you want to aspire to, but the ego is who you are. That's like the intrinsic, the purest nature of yourself, and the id is like the in between. It's like the middle space. To me, ego is my perception of this reality, and it changes and shifts almost daily. Like I feel like a different person almost daily, in that I'm having different experiences, and I'm just allowing them to flow. I'm not trying to stay locked up in who I was ages and ages ago, because if I do that, I won't fit through the door that I'm supposed to head through now. And that speaks back to manifestation. Again, so many people are living in that past, and so they are the past. They are that past rendition of themselves. And there's a door carved out to fit your silhouette of who you need to be in this present moment. And if you're who you are in the past, you're not going to fit through that, which is why it could take longer for you to walk in your destiny, because you're stuck in your failures and in your pain and things like that.
Yeah, I would have to ride the coattail of Cal's definition of ego, that it's your perception. Another way that you can, or the way that I like to think about the ego is your ability to objectify yourself. It's this objectifying of self, which is why you don't think of your role as something you do, but as something you are. I am woman. No, I am not. I am mother. No, I am not. I am male. No, man. No, I am not. I am Christian. No, I am not. What I am is spirit. These other things are things that I do in their given capacity, but things that I am not limited to. And when we are present in our ego self, we mischaracterize ourselves as are these roles as not roles, but this is who I am. And this is why the ego deaths are so earth-shattering when your child finally grows up and you don't know what to do with yourself as a parent, because you thought that was who you were. You thought that who you were was dad and mom. It's why it was earth-shattering. The divorce was earth-shattering because you thought their relationship was who you were. You thought the other person was who you were, my soulmate. This is why you have an issue with being perceived as unattractive, because you think you are your body. You also think you are what other people communicate to you that you are. And I said this on Truth Seekers podcast, that all of us are figments of each other's imagination. I need you, Cal, because, and I need you to agree with who I am so that I can maintain myself as a figment of your imagination, and you need me to do the same thing. You need me to believe who you are so that who you are feels objective to you, because the ego is striving for objectivity. So if I can surround myself with like-minded people and I can exist within like-minded spaces, I'm living a life where I'm putting myself in a position to have who I think I am be made real to me again and again and again and again and again, which is why none of us like being friends with our haters. Or we don't like being in conversation with people who are disagreeable. Or we don't like talking and conversing and being in a community with people who are different from us, because we're all trying to reinforce who we believe ourselves to be by surrounding ourselves with people who agree to this perception of self. And the reason why we don't like haters and we don't like naysayers is because they remind us that even though you might not be also what I'm saying you are as your hater, but I'm reminding you that you also aren't who you want so deeply to believe yourself to be. And there's something on a subconscious level that makes us so, that resonates with that. We have this vitriolic response to that, like, how dare you say that about me? How dare you interpret me as that? How dare you interpret me as that? And you may not, in fact, be what other people are interpreting you to be. But what's also, in fact, true is that you're not who you also parade yourself around, and that around as, and that's okay. And if that's not okay to you,
I see.
that you are deeply committed to the ego self. And so we're all just figments of each other's imagination. I could say the most disrespectful, blatantly disgusting things about Cal. That doesn't make them true. He could say the most blatantly respectful, loving, honorable things about me. That doesn't necessarily make them true either. Neither is true. I'm having my subjective experience of you based upon the way that my consciousness interprets you in my life, and vice versa. And I think the reason why Christ could get up on that cross and say, forgive them not, for they know not what they do, Father. They know not what they do. And because he didn't identify with the heroism of it all or the villain of it all. And when you transcend your ego, you're not in a position anymore to take people's love for you or their hate for you personal, which allows you to be compassionate toward those who use you, allows you to do good to those who hurt and harm you. But the reason you can't find yourself capable of praying for those who hate you and doing right by those who do wrong by you is because you're so egoic and take what they do personally, because you think you are what they are attacking. And you don't realize that they're having their own twisted experience of their own selves. And that's being reflected back to you as bullying you, as teasing you, as intimidating you, as targeting you. And because you think you are the you that they're projecting on, because you also are projecting onto you. You formed a you formed the I. So the I can be crucified.
Indeed.
If you form an I, you also form a cross to be nailed to. If you want to be free from that cross, free from the pain of that cross, you have to allow yourself not to develop this deep sense of I. When you love me, That's about you. When you hate me, that's about you. I'm simply being, and what you're doing is interpreting my being. I'm being, and you're interpreting. And being very clear about your being so that you can allow other people to interpret freely. Don't get in the way of their interpretations. Let them interpret you as they shall, because they will. Which is why no matter how many
regardless,
doesn't matter if you preach to the blue moon, it doesn't matter if you pull out all the facts. Because perception is reality.
Indeed. That makes a...
And so it's this idea that what they're doing to you has any intrinsic value. They can't do something to you if you don't exist. You're doing this to who you think I am. Which is why this is between you and you. This is all in your mind, all in your perception. So do away. Enjoy it. Look, enjoy that. Be that. And it does take a lot of shedding of the ego to get to that place. But you do get to that. That's the reward of growing spiritually and evolving and maturing spiritually, is to shed that ego self time and time and time again. Why y'all think a lot of gurus are bearded, ungroomed, and look untamed? They've even transcended this idea of needing to even put that much into what they even look like.
Too much effort. Yeah.
Like at best, they just show up clean. But
that's all you get.
It is clean. Everything else is frizzy and whatever. Like it's not that deep and that's all about the transcendence of the ego self. You just transcend your ideal self. This is no longer something external to you. This is an internal beingness that exists within you. But is there anything you want to say to that? Because I kind of just carried on a little bit.
No, it was good. It made me think of the perception of reality and consciousness. And this is something I've been kind of mulling over a lot lately, is what exactly consciousness is. And the fact that you're saying that, like, you are not real, I'm not real, we're just figments of each other's imagination, kind of gives credence to the idea that we're not actually experiencing reality as it is right now. Like, we're experiencing different versions of it. We're experiencing our perception of reality, and our perception of reality isn't actually what's happening in reality. It's not what's real. And I would even venture to say that real isn't what's definable in this 3D reality by, scientific tools. Like, this reality isn't as real as the other dimensional realities that we go to when we project or when we have these mystical experiences. And so it just speaks to me to the idea that, and it was very good. I mean, I needed it. Shoot, it was it was valuable to me. This idea that creating the ego gives you a place to be assaulted, and creating the I means that I can be crucified and things like that. So it's a very powerful notion. I'll be putting that into practice. The not existing. I mean, it's stuff that you read about, but it's things that have to be experienced as well. Because Buddhists and Hindus, they ascribe to the idea that it's like nothing, like you are nothing. And so they have meditative practices about a thought comes up about what you need to do or who you are or where you're going to go or what people think of you. You just let those things go because they're not you. You become the observer who's watching the thoughts, who's watching the life and everything unfold. So that's pretty good. I'm down with that.
So what is your ideal around right and wrong? Is there such thing in your worldview as right and wrong?
Oh, of course. Of course. I mean, right and wrong, we obviously know right and wrong comes from like cultural biases. Different cultures think that, for instance, the legal age of consent is different. You go to different places in the world and it'll be 14 and even younger than that. And so like right and wrong, and this is where Christianity likes to place the 10 Commandments and other things like that. You have to supersede this man-made laws and go to, the 10 Commandments, this immortal law of things that need to be followed and stuff like that. And so right and wrong is, in my mind, it's entirely subject to perception. and context. So someone can be robbing a store, taking food, and someone, right and wrong is also it's something of observation. Like, you don't exist unless someone is observing you. It goes back to that whole thing. Right and wrong is determined upon what people are seeing, who's judging the right and wrong, and what is exactly happening within context. So if I'm robbing a store, people would immediately say, well, that's wrong. You can't rob that store. But in the same breath, I have a family to provide for, I'm homeless, and I'm stealing this food so that we can survive. And in that context, the proper judge would say, all right, well, whatever. Even some countries have made it, perfectly legal for homeless people to go in and take food from grocery stores within capacity, things like that. And so, like, this idea that right and wrong is something totally objective, I think it's difficult to really say that. It kind of touches on the hedonistic nature of people, but it's hard to say one way or the other what's right and wrong, because right and wrong is black and white, and human existence is not so stark in contrast. Human existence is colorful. So war is the killing. And so killing can't be wrong because it gets things done in a certain way. War is the conflict between nations, between people, and it resolves, and peace is supposed to come from it. It often doesn't, but that's just the case. I'm trying to establish the point that right and wrong is, as Buddhists believe, and certain people have told me, and what I personally believe at some points, is that right and wrong is just something that you create. It's another thing that doesn't exist. It's just your perception of reality, what you deem to be something good or evil. But if you remove yourself from ego, if you remove yourself from the perceptions in this reality, good and bad is just another type of energy. Alan Watts talks about pain as another type of energy. Pain isn't something good or bad. It's just a signal that the body is sending to the brain. You've reached a threshold. The body's being destroyed, something like that. And Alan Watts even goes on to say, if you torture a person for long enough, it'll get to the point where you've just got to kill that person, because they'll begin to like the pain. They'll get to a point where the pain is no longer something that's horrible, that's destroying the eye. It'll get to a point where it's just some far out sensation. And they'll be like, oh, damn, I can't do nothing with this person. Let me just kill this guy and move on to the next. Like, you tortured him too much. Like, it's not going to work. And so even pain in itself, something that anyone would say is bad, is just an experience. And what I've learned about being Buddhist is that you just have to take experience as what it is without judgment. And that'll help you connect to that universal consciousness, because you're no longer in the seat of your mind looking through your eyes saying, okay, like, this is bad, this is good. And you're living in the waves and the blowing and tossing of those scenarios. You're transcendent. Like, you're outside of what people perceive to be good and bad. Now, do I believe that when some psychopath kills a little girl, is that something good? No. And that goes back to societal, objective means of what's going on. No, I don't know why bad things happen to good people. It goes back to that whole thing. But there are things that you can clearly point at and say, well, this is bad. What Hitler did, that's bad. What Stalin did, that's bad. All these terrible things that these serial killers do, that's bad. That's horrible. But it's bad in the sense that the person that was killed isn't hurt anymore. They're not going through any pain. It's bad for the people that are left behind. And so right and wrong is determined on who's doing the judging at the end of the day. And is the curse, or is the sickness in itself bad? Or is the interpretation of the sickness bad? And that's the duality. You can't have the darkness without the light, and vice versa. A complex issue, a complex question, like you like to ask me. but it's a very roundabout answer to say, I don't believe in right and wrong, but I believe in my current stance existing right now, that my goal, my mission for being alive, is to convey and to give off as much love as possible, and to help people reach their highest, most actualized self. That's my goal. The failure to do that, I guess, would be bad, but bad is just another illusion,
Yeah, absolutely. That's
You eating good over there. Look at you.
You just took us on a whirlwind, and I think so. I agree that in my worldview, I don't hold a right and wrong anymore. That's just more so like information. I deal with a lot of people who suffer from guilt and shame. They blame themselves for a lot of things. And the way that I help them to liberate themselves from guilt is by telling them, don't look at what you've done with judgment. Just look at it as information. It's just data. What you feel after you made a decision communicates to you what you think about the choice you made. From there, you can decide whether you want to make that choice again based upon the emotion that it provides back to you, or not based upon the emotion that it provides back to you. But decisions are simply decisions, and choices are choices, and they provide an outcome and provide a reality that you get to analyze, discern, dissect, and come to your own conclusions about. Also, a big thing with healing guilt and shame is also about this idea of understanding the difference between the true you and the ego you. Because once you understand that, you won't feel so guilty about all the thoughts you think, because you also understand that while it's your ego that can think those things, it's the true you that's actually observing those things. And so there's a part of you that is just observing the way you feel, that's observing the way you think. You don't have to be guilt-ridden over the thoughts you think, because you don't necessarily get to decide what thoughts and patterns of thoughts move across the landscape of your soul any more than we get to stop the clouds from blowing over our homes. But we do get to decide to stop and look.
Right.
Plenty of thoughts intersect through my mind on a daily. Sexual ones, perverse ones, violent ones, beautiful ones, loving ones, poetic ones, scientific ones. I mean, I'm consciousness. So everything within the collective unconscious is swimming through my on a daily basis.
That's a good one. I am conscious, and everything that flows through
everything
united unconscious
in the collective unconscious is coming to me. I get to decide what I honor. I get to decide what I decide to meditate upon that comes through me. That's where the personal accountability comes in at. But you don't have to feel guilty necessarily even about the things that you decide to do, because you have to do things in order to retrieve information, even if things you do create a bad income. But you needed that bad income to expand and strengthen your awareness about the choices you make and about what you understand about each particular choice you make and the thought that motivated that choice. What you are?
I'm reading comments over here.
Kyle, you have
silently lurking.
Kyle, you have great discernment in your own right. Lovely to come into your existence. Salted caramel here is here for all of the
salted is
cereal, all of the conversation.
It's not real. None of this is real. No,
this is a simulation. It's okay, but
But that's another thing, though. Simulation theory is a thing. Like, you go back to the Matrix. This is all just harping on that simulation idea. Like, all of this is a simulation. Some people, like Elon Musk, believe that it is definitely a simulation through like the calculations that can be discerned from, visible light in space and all these other things, and just math in general and how it's so precise. And it's like this was created, this reality we're in. To me, astral projection is very much like getting out of the Matrix. Like I told you, I projected a couple days ago, and it was like I had had a dry spell for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And my spouse woke up early and left, so I had like the morning to do my routine, and I projected, and I was like, oh yes, it always feels so much lighter. And there's immediately no sense of worry for time. I notice immediately. It's not like I'm worried about what I have to do next, so much so well, you guys be happy when most of us wake up. I don't understand. Hey yo, what's good, Q? Hey yo, Q.
Hey yo, Q.
The homie Q. But yeah, it's just it frees me from this reality, and I feel like that's what psychedelics do for a lot of people. Is it shows them, or it basically opens the back door out of the matrix so that they can see beyond it. And oftentimes, when you get out of the matrix in that way, using psychedelics, you have to leave your ego to go far enough. Like there are realms where ego doesn't follow in these psychedelic experiences. Like with your ayahuasca trip, you had to go through that ego death, which was very much a death for you at that time, in order for you to experience the transcendent and abundant love that you experienced. And a lot of people who take DMT have this experience of shedding themselves like onions. Like they're peeling away everything they think they are until they don't remember who they are anymore. It's like, oh, I'm not any of those things. I am just consciousness. I'm just awareness experiencing reality. So it's amazing that you can get there both ways, meditation and psychedelics. That's why I find it really interesting to experiment with those sort of things, because it is just like a crash course in, enlightenment really quick.
Yeah. No, that was the result of my ayahuasca experience, is the temporary obliteration of the ego self. And what I came to realize is that, my goodness, my consciousness is peace that's being still. I'm just peace being still. That's why there's this kind of ecstasy of nothingness. I'm just peace that's completely still. And it reminds me of kind of the design of the ocean, where on the surface level is where you would say all the emotions are. That's all the ravaging tides and movement and all of the surface expression of the ego self is. And then in the middle is where it's teeming with life, the sharks, the fish, the turtles, the octopus. These could be all the thought forms and thoughts and things you think. But then the deeper you get into the ocean, it's just perfectly peaceful. Just this kind of void, this motionless, unmoving, perfectly silent void of darkness. And as you were saying, as we peel back the layers of the ego self, we reach that place of perfect peace. I know that the word or the scriptures say that there's a peace that transcends all understanding. It's an irrational peace. It's an illogical peace. It's not, and it's illogical and irrational because it's not based. It's not a transactional peace. It's not as a Q. It's not a peace that comes about because now we've all waking up. It's a peace that is a result of being, which means that Q. I'm gonna be motherfucking happy whether the rest of y'all wake up or not. Q. It means that I'm not gonna pinch myself off from source, no matter what condition this world is in. If Donald Trump rules for another 4 years and the world is upside down and politicians and religious leaders have lost their fucking mind, that through this,
I'm gonna be okay either way. It's all good.
Through all this, my challenge is to observe my peace. And all that happens because this is what will make your happiness and your sanity and your peace of mind conditional. It's when it's transactional. I won't be okay until he starts acting right, or I won't be at peace until my family is finally over their bullshit, or I won't be happy until I have this many followers, or until my income is at this level, or until I look like this, or until I can dress like that, or until, and as long as everything good in you is contingent upon circumstances, you're going to be, you are going to be a schizophrenic, bipolar, multiple personality having individual who is bound to be different between 8 a.m. and 12 p.m. and then from 12 to 3 is another personality, and then from 3 to 6 is another personality, and from 6 to 8 is another personality, because you're just being wangled along based upon
and tossed by the wind, man.
Have you land. And that is no way for any human being to live. It's a disastrous way to live, and that can lead to the manifestation of mental illness. Because you think that you're out of control and you're not in control, and the circumstances have no consciousness in them in and of themselves. They're just a result of an out of whack consciousness. And so this powerlessness leads to depression and anxiety, this fear of what lies beyond. Every decision, oh my God, what will tomorrow break? People have been so are so out of alignment, and they have such a misunderstanding about the fact that they are actually co-creating their reality, that people actually, God forbid something good happens, they're not even present. They're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, okay, what's next? This is too good to be true.
You hear it all the time.
You know
it's
what?
Like, this ain't gonna last. Right?
And that's exactly why the fuck it doesn't.
Exactly. And I've been on that. That's my mantra lately. I've been saying it in almost every video. It's like, you can't tell the universe I'll be happy, whole, and secure, and everything will be fine. I'll be a perfect peace once my circumstances change, because the universe is waiting for you to be happy, whole, and at peace to change those circumstances, because then you're giving off the energy to incite that change. Like, people don't realize that not just your negative thoughts are changing reality, but your negative emotions are drawing to you. For whatever reason, it doesn't work the same way it does in reality. You can't draw opposite things by you. So you can't, opposites don't attract spiritually. Like, you draw to yourself what you're giving off in the spiritual realm. So if you're negative, you're getting the negative. If you're positive, you're getting the positive. And people get locked up in the difficulty of transmuting their emotions from something negative to something positive. And this is what we were talking about before, about I've been calling it cardiokinesis. I think it has so much more to do than telekinesis and any of that, but I feel like power, as it's generated in this 3D reality, comes through the heart chakra. Like, the way to change and transmute your negative emotions and your tired and depressed look on reality is by facilitating positive emotions in yourself. It's something that you have to bring about within you. You have to literally feel the reality that you want to bring to you. You have to feel the future self. You have to feel like your future self in order to bring that future to you. I don't know why the universe works this way. I mean, it makes sense, but it's the only way it could work. Because if you're steadily feeling that hurt and you're living in that pain, like, you're existing in the past. There's no way you can move into a new future because you're living in that past. And you are co-creating your future, like you said. You're co-creating that future.
In the comment section right now, who is living in the past, who refuses to do exactly what you are stating here. I'm not going to identify them personally, but I know who they are. Could you just hypothetically speak to this person? Because you are really on the path right now of telling them exactly what I echo to them every time we speak. But when I tell you that this person suffers from a very profound sense of just of this shame, they just absolutely are struggling with this idea of hope, with this idea of believing that things can be better. They also, because they're ashamed, believe that their suffering is justifiable, that they deserve the misery and the unhappiness of their lives. And they they also are struggling with a lot of codependency and attachment, and they are very transactional in their view. I mean, pretty much what happens when the ego has come and put in full possession of a person. I mean, it almost acts like a possession, like a demonic possession. It's just a.
I've got to address this in a few ways. Obviously, don't know who the person is, but I'll talk like I'm talking to myself, because this is something that I deal with on a regular basis. There was a time where I felt a tremendous amount of shame because of the way I dealt with a group of people I was with. I was in the perceived wrong in this instance, in my dealings with them. And I stayed away from them, and I bombarded myself with negativity because of the shame that I felt. And all I was doing was continually creating the framework for a negative cycle to repeat. So this is what I've observed happens. Something negative happens in your life, and you learn from that negative instance as, okay, this is what life is like. And you take that paradigm of, okay, this is what life is like, this negative thing that happened to me. And you project that into your future and say, whenever something similar to this is going to happen, it's going to be negative because it happened before. The reason why you do that is because you're trying to mitigate the pain that you're going to feel, because it hurts to say things are going to go good, things are going to go better, I'm being hopeful, and then to still fall. It's very painful, because it's like you're opening yourself up again. You're like, all right, I'm going to love again. And then you get hit again. I feel like it's specifically relationship for this person, but you open yourself up again, and you're trying to be hopeful. You're trying to be better, and shit, it just doesn't work. I was recently trying to get into stocks before. I don't talk about this a lot because my channel is mainly just spiritual, and I was really heavy into the stock market, and I had a partnership with someone, and they gave me a lot of money to go into the stock market, more money than I had at one time. Mm-hmm. And I was supposed to go in every day using the platforms that I was using. I was supposed to go in, I was trading options, and I was supposed to go in and do what I was supposed to do. I had trained for this throughout the whole year, and I was continually telling myself, this is going to work. I'm good. I was trying to be positive minded, and it still crumbled, lost everything. And I understand the pain of loss when you've tried your hardest, but you have to understand that when you continually lose and you're trying your hardest, it means that you haven't fully tried your hardest, and the direction you're in is probably off kilter just a little bit. Oftentimes the universe will close a door so that you go to the next one, and it may be that you're in a hallway right now and there are plenty of doors, and you're trying each one and they're wrong, and you're just going to the next one. And you got to go all the way to the end of the hall, and that's the right door. So it could be that you're trying something different, or that you're trying the same thing and you're getting the same result. So you just need to accept the new, accept the unexpected. So often when we're stuck in the past, we're stuck in our routines, and the routine is comfortable because we know that amount of pain. Like, okay, I can deal with this. I can stay in this pain body. I can deal with this pain because I deal with it all the time. And when you're living in your routine, you're not opening yourself up to the possibility of synchronicities and serendipitous encounters with people. You're not open to that. So the first thing that you could do, and one thing that I've been practicing, is a meditation of sitting and letting your thoughts go. Because if you're feeling shame the way I was, every thought is trying to reiterate to you, your ego is trying to reiterate to you that you are this circumstance, and it is shackling you to this failure, this relationship. You have to let that thought go by and ignore it. The ego is like a dog. It'll bark and it'll bark, and if you give it attention, it'll keep barking because you're just barking along with it. You're just like, that's not true. No. You're barking along with it. You just let it go because the thought isn't you. The reality that you experienced isn't you. You're just latching onto it to give you a sense of purpose, a sense of identity. Sit there and just let your thoughts go. Let your thoughts run. Whatever thought comes up, it'll be thoughts of shame, depression, anger, all that stuff will come up, and just let it go. Don't attach yourself to it specifically. Just let it go because it's not you. And then your mind will start to even out. The ripples of your mind will start to flatten. At that point, I want you to think of all the things good in your life that you want. Think of one thing in particular. We'll start with one thing in particular that you want from your life, one thing you're trying to manifest. If it's a new relationship, think of a new relationship. If it's a new job, think of that. Think of that one thing, but don't just think of it coming to you. Feel how you would feel if that thing was real. Because the moment you think about it, it becomes real. The moment you pray for it, like Jesus says, believe that you have it because you do. It's yours. The moment your desire left you to go to the universe, that infinite field of positive creativity, it was real. So the thing you need to realize is that your mind is like a field. And when you plant negativity in that field, just like planting positivity, or let's say you're planting a flower and nightshade, the poison is going to grow abundantly. Your mind does not care what you plant in it. The important thing is that it will reproduce what you plant in it in abundance. So if you're planting negativity in your mind, you're going to reap that negativity tenfold, because your mind is just, it's neutral. It's going to give you back whatever you're putting into it. So when you start putting in positivity coupled with positive emotion, then you will start bearing that fruit. Because it could be possible that your whole field is full of nightshade. It's full of poison because you've been conditioning yourself throughout your entire life that negative things happen to you. So when the good things happen, you don't even notice them.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. That's what I would say. That's a lot. I'm sorry, but that's what I would say.
To whom that may concern, you better find Kyle's Cash App. He just gave you some stage 10 psychotherapy feedback right there with some metaphysical wisdom up in there. It's 444.
Our times are different.
I know. Yeah, I got 333 on my time.
Synchronicities, man.
Man, that's really incredible. I teach the same things. Like, what do you think? So, what would you say forgiveness is?
Oh, I can only speak from experience. Forgiveness oftentimes has been twofold. It's been forgiving myself and hello. It's been forgiving myself, and it's been severing a tie that I've had with someone through not forgiving them. So in that 7-hour intensive counseling session that I had, it involved forgiving my father for not being in my life, forgiving people who had abused me throughout my life, people who had molested me, things like that. It was forgiving all of those people. And in so doing, it was severing the connection they had with my heart.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, when you hold on to people and you judge them and you keep that resentment with that person is renting space not only in your mind, but in your heart. And you're sending energy to that person. That person is leeching your energy unbeknownst to them. So when you forgive that person, you're cutting that cord that you have with them. And forgiveness is valuable to you in that it takes receiving. If someone is forgiving you, you have to receive that forgiveness. And so it takes you from a state of catatonic depression and shame to receiving the allowance to be who you are, the allowance to feel better. Like, so often when you're feeling shame, you don't think you can feel better. It's like you don't deserve it. But when you're forgiven, it's like, okay, I'm cool. I can feel better now. I don't have to live in this realm of depression.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that.
When you absorbed MSG, you got MK11, D-Rock.
That's the result of China White of forgiveness is moving on. Like that's the end product. I think of forgiveness. Well, in order to forgive, you have to have your basis has to be a certain basis in order to even use the ability of forgiveness. But what forgiveness for me is you're guilty, but you're free to go. Because a lot of times,
I still hate you, but I ain't even gonna do nothing about it.
Not hate you. What happened. Make no mistake about the fact that I've forgiven you doesn't mean that the reality that took place didn't take place. It took place. And you did your part in making sure that what happened. And yes, you are wrong. Or you were in error.
So
you were in ego.
Yeah.
And yes, if I'm standing on this jury stand in my ego, I'm sentencing you accordingly. But if I'm extending the same compassion to you that I desire God and others to extend to me in place of my error, in place of my intentionality, then you know what? You are guilty, but you are free to go. You are free to go. And I believe that this is the stance of Christ, which is why I'm so inspired by Christ. Because Christ wasn't about pigeonholing people to the choices they make. Because he understood, for one, that most human beings were having an identity crisis to begin with. Most people didn't even have a clear understanding of who they in fact were. And because you don't know, you have no choice but to act like a heathen because you don't know who you are. And because I'm the one who knows that you don't know who you are, and I know the place you do all of this out of, a lack of identity, a lack of a real experience of love that's transformative. You do these things out of that lack you spoke about earlier on in this conversation about your own upbringing and how you were shaped as a male. And those who understand that have a responsibility to keep that in mind as they continue to journey. That, yeah, you're wrong. People clobbered me and tried to crucify me when I took my ex back because my ex had showed me more times than enough that he was full of crap. But because I practice forgiveness and because I don't construct a strong sense of me, it's easy for me to forgive people. I might not can't forgive you on the spot, depending on the severity of the offense. But
yeah, you feel it. The energy is there.
I come around to forgiveness rather timely. And people also questioned me when I took him back. They wanted to know, like, how do you know that you can trust him, CONSCIOUZTV? I made the choice to let him back into my life, not based upon whether I could trust him, but whether I could trust me. There is no such thing as trusting another human being. What you can do is perfect and master the art of trusting yourself. I trust me to love you and not lose myself this time. I trust me to be with you and to maintain my self-care and responsibility to myself while also participating in this relationship. I trust me to know that it's my job to do my work and not yours. It's my job to remember that I'm the only one who can do my work. And all you can do is complement the process. I trusted me this time around. That's why when I took him back, he came, he saw, he conquered. And our relationship was a disaster the second time around, just like it was the first. But the distinctive difference was in the outcome of the disaster. The first time the shit hit the fan, I got the short in the process. That's what led me to ayahuasca. Because this time I knew who the fuck I was. Oh, baby. I was the monument left standing I was the monument left standing when the dust settled, when the rubble settled. I was that indestructible monument that still somehow maintained its structural integrity. And it was because the me I spent my time building between the time that I broke up with him in 2018 and the time I took him back in 2020 was on a totally different foundation.
I can tell you're vibrating very high.
He left here broken, confused, angry. And I left him moving on as if nothing had ever happened. Because as far as I'm concerned, nothing had happened because I had continued on in who the hell I was practicing myself to be, despite him coming and despite him leaving. The only difference was I never switched up on me this time around, which is why I needed that ego death. Because I think because we are so cuddled in life and we have parents and families and we live in this transactional system that we come to believe in ourselves that I'm not totally responsible for me. I have a mommy that's supposed to be responsible, a daddy that's supposed to be responsible, a government that's supposed to be responsible, a family that's supposed to be responsible, that I'm a shared responsibility.
Right.
So when life kicks our ass and puts us in these positions where we feel alone, we feel defeated, and no matter how bad we want someone else to help us up, we can't be helped up. There's no resources in sight. Oh man, our mental health plummets because it completely fucks up and distorts this core belief system we all hold in ourselves, which is that I'm not fully responsible for me. And sometimes, and I think for those who hold that core belief, I held that core belief. I had to have massive ego deaths to correct that core belief. I had to have it. Now, every human being don't get their ass knelt to the cross like that because their ego may be set up in a different way, which requires a different experience in order to awaken. Right. But I held a core belief that I didn't know was infringing upon my willingness and ability to really walk and live responsibly for Davion, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and physically. And I didn't even know that I had a blind spot in my rearview mirror until that relationship and the aftermath of that relationship and the ego death that provided and all the information that came flooding out of that experience, not about him, but about me.
Yeah. And to help you grow. Yeah.
Because oftentimes when we're hurt, we look to what's wrong with the other person. I was more so tuned into all the information about myself. And I learned the hard way. And baby, I am so grateful for the hard way. I am so grateful for who the ass that hard way molded. That I would literally, I would do that cross again and again and again if I had to, because there's no way I could have gotten to who I was without it. I just could not. We never think of the traumatizing events in our lives as something that we attracted, because oftentimes we make a choice to resist the ego death instead of surrendering to it.
Always. Because the ego is, we believe the ego is us. We believe that it's, if the ego goes, we go. That's always the way it is. So these psychedelics would be very rough on people, myself included, because we're so attached to the ego self. It's like it's always difficult to let go of, because in a sense you're letting go of your identity. You're letting go of what people have told you, what you're familiar with. And in order to let that ego go, you do have to, like you were saying, you have to come to grips with the fact that all of this is just illusory. None of it is real. You know, this is all imaginary.
Yeah. It is. We've been here 3 hours.
Yeah, we got a few minutes. I'm trying to, get you.
Hours.
Now we got 7 hours to go, man.
7 hours to go. I guess as a at least as a conclusion to part one of this dialogue. Mm-hmm. What do you think about everything going on in the world right now? Does it scare you? Do you think that we are on the edge of a decline? That this is a really bad thing? Or do you think that what we're going through is a part of a awakening process? Or do you think that what's happening is the consequences of not being awakened, and that we could be destroyed in the consequences of our actions in the world we've created? Like, how are you feeling about the news and, just all of the social upheaval and all of the communities that are fighting for resources and a voice? And it's a lot going on between the LGBT community, the Black Lives Matter movement, the women's equality movement, the xenophobia, the political left and right. Everything is kind of, it's like our soul is throwing up all at once, and everything is coming up out of the grave.
It's definitely an upheaval. There's definitely some quaking going on in the heavenlies, it feels like, with what's going on right now. I see two ways of going about it, and that's the way of detachment, that mysticism sort of approach of, none of these things actually matter. I see the overall grand scheme of things is that we're transitioning, like you said, into a higher frame of consciousness. But also at the same time, I am human. I am in a body. So I still have to exist here with other humans in bodies. So I see these issues that are going on societally. And the best thing that I think I can do is better myself and try to join a cause that I believe in that aligns with who I am. So I did protesting with Black Lives Matter. I am close to the Chicago area, so it was very close to home, all the things that were happening. I mean, rioting and protesting was going on throughout the whole world. And like, we've never seen, it's wild right now. But at the same time, it can't be something that pulls you out of center. And so I've been focusing on remaining whole and focusing on, that self-care and that self-love, as opposed to letting what the world is preaching and singing to you be the song of your heart. That can't be the case, because the world is frequently going to give you reasons to believe the negativity that your mind is trying to rehearse to you. As far as like elections and things like that, I have never been a believer in the two-party system being the fundamental way things are supposed to go. I might want to look up the quote, but I keep hearing this, that George Washington was suggesting against the two-party system being the main way that we carry out our democracy. It's like, it's not the best way of doing it. I haven't believed in the two-party system because it's just another way for us to divide as a culture, as a nation. The central goal should be the well-being of everyone from top to bottom. Whatever system institutes a way for us to bring affluence and, providence to everyone is the system we should go for, because it's holistic. The two-party system and the warring that goes on between people, it's like sports. It's like, my sports team is better than yours because, whatever. My household is just Green Bay and yours is Chicago. The Bears and stuff like that. It feels that way when it comes to politics for me. It just feels like another reason, another validation for people to divide themselves and to argue and to sift themselves out. Division is just another way for the ego to feel secure, because it has to rebel against something in order to feel like it has a stance. Because if it doesn't rebel against something or take a stance, it'll feel like it doesn't have a position. It doesn't have a sure footing or an identity.
And it has a superiority complex as well.
Oh, definitely. Part of the reason why I feel like people are so crazy, and they're crazy people on both sides, is Democrat Republican thing. I've seen some crazy people, man. I've seen some crazy people, and I feel like the reason why these people are so crazy is because, like I had told you before, Americans have this, or just humans in general have this elitist, narcissistic tendency to join whatever group or establishment will make them feel like they are better than someone else. This can be Christianity, this can be Democrat or Republican, this can be a gang or a club. It doesn't matter. If it makes you feel like you're getting information that is not privy to everyone else and that you are better than everyone else, people will give their lives for that institution. And that's how cults get so powerful, I believe, is because people give themselves over to these ideologies and these belief systems that make them feel better and superior to other people. And it's toxic. It's terribly toxic. So I'm not a big fan of it at all. And so when people ask me,
do you think that there's a way to belong to these categories without being egoic about it? Like, do you think that there's a way to be Christian without also being divisive and destructive to other people? Do you think that there's a way to be left or right wing without?
I do. It's like, I do believe that, but it's like precarious footing. It's like navigating booby traps. It's built into these systems for people to fall into that sort of rut. Do I think there are totally genuine and wholehearted people who are left or right wing or Christians or any other religion or people in cults, if you want to call it that? I do, definitely. There are people who are genuine, who are seeking revelation and transformative experiences. And there are people who are Democrat and who are Republican who believe those things because of just what they come to believe as far as their political stance on what they think makes a good country. But so often people peddle their beliefs and shove them down other people's throats and crucify them if they have differences, simply because it makes them feel better. It makes them feel superior and justified if someone else is wrong and they're right, which is why I feel like you get these religions that are totally segmented. It's just one lane. You can only be going one way, and if you're not going that way, you're wrong, because it makes you feel superior to everyone else. Like, we're doing it right, everybody else is wrong. And just because these are the people I run into frequently, Republicans that I've run into have that mindset. And I'm sure there are Democrats with that mindset, obviously. It's just the people I run into are like, oh, that's stupid. So-and-so is a pedophile. It's like, oh, this happened, that happened, emails here and there, libtards here and there. It's like, guys, this isn't the point. This isn't game night. This isn't fourth quarter, Sunday night football, if it has quarters. I think it's like, it's not a competition, it's a cooperation. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to cooperate and pick the best person to be president. And I don't feel like it's that way. I feel like it's just, I'm going to pick this party, even though I feel like this person is absolutely ludicrous. I'm just going to pick it because I want my team to win. It's like, I can't vote for either one of these people then, if that's the case, because like someone asked me, he's a really political friend of mine, right wing. He asked me who I was going to vote for and why, because he's a very forward person. And I was like, imagine if you had to make a choice and you were betting on a fight and you had to bet your life savings on that fight, right? And they showed you the contender and the champion, and both the champion and the contender were laughable fighters. And it could go either way, and neither one of them, it wasn't going to be a good fight, but you had to place a bet, and you had to place your life saving on this bet. But you didn't know who would win because neither one of them looked good. You would not want to place a bet, because then you're gambling on the fate of the future. Like, nothing looks good here. Yeah, I would not want to take that bet. And so I told him that, and he was like, well, that makes perfect sense. Because if there are, I know I'm super long-winded about this, but
love it. You're good.
It's an issue for sure. If both people being presented by these parties have all these allegations against them and they're duplicitous, and you know they say Biden has signed bills and passed and voted to pass laws against black communities and to criminalize black communities and people and things like that, and then Trump is a xenophobic and homophobic, all these other things. Why would you want to vote for any of those people? And people like to talk about the political system and how it is with the electoral colleges, and it's like, oh, I can't vote for anything because the electoral college is going to vote in favor for the state that I'm in. It's like this whole party system is just, and if you believe in conspiracies and the Illuminati and the shadow government, like I have for years, like I don't care who they put in place because the agenda still gets done, regardless of who you are. It's like we're still moving toward that new world order, reduce the population of humanity so it's more controllable, and like the super elites of the world can control us and live forever as gods. And it's nonsense. I don't know. It gets real crazy real fast. Fast.
I hate kind of the connotation that conspiracies have gotten, because they've kind of been defined as thoughts that are without objective truth. And really, there's more empirical evidence to prove what can be considered sometimes to be a conspiracy theory than there really is for the crap that's being sold as mainstream. Mm-hmm. And we're getting into a little bit of that on this Thursday's The Gentleman's Panel. I'm going to be busting some bubbles about some things. Yeah, I agree. Like, I think a big part of why 2020 and kind of dawning upon the age of Aquarius has kind of really upset and exposed our government systems for what they are, which is just corrupt and sociopathic and narcissistic in nature, is not only just to kind of correct the government that we've created, but also to not forget that we as individuals are just as responsible for the way that we shape our world as these systems that we put this burden of responsibility on. Like, sometimes having a government system kind of disconnects us from this idea of what it means to like personally contribute to the world you live in as well. Like, yes, our government should do something about the homeless, but each of us as individuals also should do something about our homeless population. Yes, something should be done to help single mothers, but those single mothers who exist within communities of people like also should do something as well. That not everything becomes about what the church can do or what the government can do, but also what me as a sole individual can do to just make sure that the people that I share my spaces with and the people that I encounter, that I also do whatever it is that I can. And I like the idea of getting back to community, because I feel like that is what would take a lot of the power out of government and put it back into the hands of the people. But the people have to be willing to like hold that power in their hands and pay more attention to themselves than they do to what the government should or should not do. Now, there's been a conversation that's been going on within the comment section about parents. Before we wrap up this discussion, what do you think woke parenting looks like? Because I kind of talk about this on my platform from time to time. And when I personally think of woke parents, I think of like Will and Jada Pinkett Smith. I think of Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union and their approach to raising their trans daughter. What do you think about parenting? Like, what do you think the role of being a parent is?
Being a parent, I feel like, is the closest thing that we in this experience right now get to being spirit guides. It's the ideal parenting situation for me would have been to nurture the curiosities I had about who I was particularly and the things that I enjoyed. So often my dreams and ambitions were pushed down and sacrificed for security and normative pursuits. And oftentimes I feel like it would have been a much better situation to have let the child do what they wanted to do. It's like when you're letting a kid play in the playground, you kind of just let them go and do it, but you supervise them, as opposed to trying to find a lane for them to go down in specific. Play with this toy, meet with these people, don't talk to those people. You have to go and do this with your life, otherwise it will be a failure. Like things like that. When you set up these rigid guidelines for a child to follow and don't give them the ability to branch out and experience life itself, then you decapitate them. You take away their ability to experience in a lot of ways. I feel like woke parenting has to do with letting your child experience life, but being the guardrails in case they fall over into the gutter. Like you're just stopping them. You're helping them get to where they're going. Just like bowling, how they have the, like the little guide rails up. It's like they're going to get there. They're trying to get to some destination. You're just kind of keeping them from falling into the pit. Either way it goes. Determining where the pit is and what that is, I imagine, is a little bit more strenuous to get into. But I feel like a lot of it is just allowing your child to be who they are and supporting who they are instead of trying to make them who you wish you could have been, which I feel like is a lot of what happens sometimes.
So what do you say to parents who believe that they're supposed to shape the identity? Like, I know that you just said, don't in fact do that. That's bad parenting. Your job is to help guide their identity, but not to create one for them. But if you come from a family and they have strong ideas around sexuality or gender or ethnicity, you're a black kid, they want you to be black. They want you to act black, whatever that means, talk black, whatever that means, associate with things that are black, whatever that means. Like,
living like that is compartmentalization. And that isn't a healthy way to look at reality. I understand that there are, strong, very disciplined households and they want their kids to be a certain way. But in every movie anyone has ever seen, when the parents are incredibly strict and they have an agenda in mind for what they want their child to do, when the child breaks free of that hounding and that, rigidity, they go absolutely crazy. I've got a clear example of that. One of my friends, when he went off to college, he was an only child. His parents were super strict on him. Couldn't go out, couldn't go to parties, couldn't do really anything. When he got to college, he lost his mind. He went, did everything, had all sorts of experiences, and he lived it up because he wasn't getting that. You can't teach children by compartmentalizing them and narrowing their view of life to what you want them to see. It never works that way. Like, you can't cage an animal and expect the animal not to come out and try to bite you when it's released or try to run away. It's like captivity, like trying to be extremely strict and extremely disciplined. And I want my kid to be a doctor and I want them to do this specifically with their life. And I see this as the only way to live life. Parents who live like that are very narrow and closed-minded. They think that their way of doing it is the only way. And their kids tend to be completely different from them. This is why you get lots of atheists who grow up in Christian households, because they're battling against what they grew up to see was obviously wrong. Oh, my father was alcoholic. He was abusive. My mother cheated. Like, obviously what they're talking about is wrong. So I'm going to go and do the exact opposite because I want to gain identity by breaking away from the forced identity I was given. So giving your kid forced identity, I don't think is the best way to do it. Obviously, you need to stop the child from going out and trying to destroy themselves. Of course, I mean, you don't want your kid to go out and start to be a drug addict. But if they did come to you and say, hey, I wanted to experiment with these psychedelics because they give you mind-altering and expanding experiences, the wrong thing to do is say, that's the devil, that's demonic, you get out of my house. The right thing would be, okay, let's do this in a controlled setting and let's be smart about this. This is how you take this substance. And this is my mindset on the war on drugs and drug culture in general. I think all drugs should be legal simply because it is safer when it is monitored and given out in proportion than if people have to go through back alleys to get this substance they don't even know what it is. I feel like raising kids is the same way this government should be basically raising its people, or like ushering its people. You have to be willing to do something different in order to get that different reality, that different response. But when it comes to kids, if your kid wants to do something that you didn't do when you grew up, or especially, my goodness, like this age and like boomers and like the generations before, like millennial and things like that, they have a very it's a very amputated view on how to make money, and they think the only way to do it is to go to college. It's a great way, sure, and it works for a lot of people, but it's not the only way to make money in this technologically advanced society we live in, when people get on camera and make far more money than people make at college, not doing anything but being entertaining on camera. Like, there are just so many different ways to live, and if you push your child into one way of living, they'll never live to their fullest potential, because you're keeping them from doing everything that they could. That's why I say that.
I agree. I also want to suggest, like, a lot of, like, I've seen the word rebellion in the chat.
I agree.
And I want to say another way to look at rebellious kids is a lot of rebellious kids, for one, are natural born leaders, but they're not living in a space where they really get to flex leadership. A part of also rebellion is also could be a side effect of your lack of facilitating independence within your child. And that's because most parents approach parenting from a place of being the authority figure and making all decisions for the child. And naturally, like, that's not what any of us are on a cellular level. Like, we are naturally evolving despite the rules applied to us, despite the walls and the cages and the handcuffs created for us, and nobody can really interrupt that process. And when we try to, it creates disaster within family units, because you're trying to control the uncontrollable. What you can do is navigate it. You can help to move and navigate the stream, but you can't control the stream itself. And so you have to find ways, when you see certain traits within your child. Like my brother, we was like the yin and the yang. He was the rebel. He was the one who did everything you don't fucking do. Like, don't call back, don't challenge teachers, like, do what I tell you to do, don't leave the front yard, like, don't smoke those cigarettes, don't and he was doing it all. And it was because my brother is a natural born leader. He had a deep sense of self, and I don't believe that my parents had him in enough activity to help him to, in a healthy way, develop those leadership qualities and to advance in those leadership qualities. I felt like if they would have put him in the right programs and provided a particular lifestyle to him, that what looked to them like rebellion could have very well have been like a great politician in the making, a great great person in general, like just someone who knew who they are, someone who knew what they wanted, and had the courage, had the zeal, had the tenacity to go do just that and be true to themselves. I often talk about being raised up as an empath, how empaths require a particular type of love and attention that they're oftentimes not given in family units, because family units aren't oftentimes educated on empath and what an empath even is. And most empaths don't even fucking know that they're empathic. So there's a lot of blind following the blind. There's a lot of blind following the blind, or leading the blind. However, every one of us, the way that I believe parenting has to be approached is, first and foremost, like, you can't be general in your parenting. You have to, as your job as a parent is first and foremost, observe the unique properties of each of your children. And then your job is also to provide lifestyles and activities that make sense to the unique attributes of the children you're raising.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, being an empath, being a mystic when I was younger, putting me in sports wouldn't have worked.
Right. Yeah.
Putting me in football, that would have worked for my brother. It wouldn't have worked for me. And if you are just kind of having this general idea of parenting, like, well, I'm raising boys, let me put them in boys programs, and you don't really realize or acknowledge what makes me unique as a male and what makes my brother unique as a male, you're going to be throwing or denying things or avoiding things or giving us things that may be completely useless to us as men, because you can't raise us just based upon the notion of men, but based upon the uniqueness of my particular personality type.
Raising you on a social construct. Yeah.
Yeah,
on a gender bias, right?
A lot of parents are lazy parents. They're doing lazy parenting, but also realize that they were raised by lazy ass parents. So it's like literally a generational cycle of laziness,
of lazy assness,
and ignorant, and it becomes secular. And I like this idea, like when Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union chose to join their 13-year-old in this journey of gender identity, I really appreciated that. Like, I appreciated parents humbling themselves and saying, look, we're going to do the unconventional thing and not necessarily stop this journey, but we're going to join our 13-year-old on this journey because this is who they believe right now they actually are. And we're going to be a family and go into this together. And if it's just a phase, if it's something that she comes out of, we'll be right here to come out of it with her. But we're going with her in this. Going in this together. And if there's an exit, we're making our exit together as a family.
Right.
And that is something that was so beautiful to me. And of course, the Black community, because of our conservative nature and the respectability politics and all the shit that makes us very tough parents. Of course, they had a major clapback to this. Like, what the fuck are you doing, Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade? Like, how can you let your 13-year-old isn't smart? Like, how the fuck is he supposed to know that he's a she at 13? What do you mean? The same way that he knows he likes the color red at 7. The same way he knows that SpongeBob is his favorite fucking cartoon character at 8 years old. The same way that he knows what fucking pair of shoes and jeans and shirts that he likes to put on, like the same way that a little girl knows the way she likes her hair done and knows what type of princess dresses stand out to her. Like, we act like children don't have any pre-existing knowledge when they do. Children know who the fuck they are. Now, whether you want to agree is one thing, but they know who the fuck they are. And when you try to tell them who the fuck they not, you get a toy fire truck smashed up against your head. You get a fucking temper tantrum in the household. You get a whole meltdown because I'm happening as a reality. And you're trying to deny that. And that's going to come with consequences and repercussions in the parental to child dynamic. And so is parenting difficult? Yeah, it can be difficult. Of course, even if your child comes to you, as you said, and they want to take drugs and shit. My particular approach would be like, first of all, what is it that you think these drugs will provide you with? Like, what is it that you're trying to see? What is it that you think the experience would take you? Like, what is it? Like, and because I'm all about getting to the bottom line of the bottom line of the bottom line. I'm like, you know what? I would interpret you wanting to do drugs as you just need fucking adventure. So you know what?
Let's go on.
I'm gonna book us to jump out of a fucking flying plane next week. Me and you, we're gonna just jump. We're gonna go parachute. I'm gonna scare the shit out of your ass. Since you need such a fucking otherworldly experience, let's go bungee jump off of the New York Bridge, okay? Because that's all you're really asking for. Is you're just looking for
trying to be courageous. The hero's journey. You want something to overcome.
You're just looking for something exciting, and maybe the truth is I'm as a parent, I have us living a boring ass routine life. There isn't enough excitement. There isn't enough fucking adventure. There isn't enough stimulation. And so,
but what if they're seeking after psychedelics in particular, not just like heroin or any other drug like that? What if they're seeking psychedelics for the purpose of expanding their consciousness and they really feel a pull to do that?
That first of all, that'd be unique because I've never heard a child be like, I want to do psychedelics for the sake of it.
I don't think it wouldn't be. I don't think it'd be a child. Not that a kid could conjure up that sort of idea, but I definitely feel like it's something that comes into a person's mind during adolescence.
I believe in being a very progressive parent, but being a progressive parent doesn't mean that you're going to get to fuck away with murder in my household. At the end of the day, my role is first and foremost to make sure that you're safe and you're protected. And I'm not going to even allow you to open yourself up to experiences that the rest of you might not be ready for. So are we doing psychedelics at 11? Fuck no, we're not.
Oh, well, clearly not. The brain ain't developed yet.
You're not developed. Your brain ain't developed. And you know what?
But it's something we have in our culture. Like, you know, there are some Native American cultures that would give their young men psychedelics as a rite of passage. It's like, here you go, take this, and you'll become a man, or what have you. And it was part of their life experience.
And your child is gonna be fucking DSS and CPS is coming through the house to take your child away because you want to.
In this culture, it's culture,
right? So there's things. Yeah,
but I mean, nobody's giving an 11-year-old cocaine. Is like, here you go, expand your mind. Like, that's
not surprised.
No one in their right mind.
Right. Okay. Right. In their right mind, for sure.
Because it's a substance that destroys. Now, like, you're thinking of psychedelics, depending on the ones you're thinking about and the ones that we're talking about. It's the reason why it's in some of these other cultures is because it is a mind altering drug, and their culture is built on experiences of like divine encounters through these plant teachers. You know, they have that's their lineage. So I could see it there, but obviously an 11-year-old isn't, you know, they're not doing ketamine and things like that. That's not the point.
Here was the gag for me as a parent. My child ain't gonna have to ask me about no shit because I'm going to be raising them in an ayahuasca lifestyle. Like, you're not gonna need to know drugs. We're going to be living a very enriching, stimulating lifestyle. You're going to be cultured. You're going to know about the world. We're going to have those difficult conversations. I'm answering all of your questions. I'm going to expose our children to different religions, to different customs. I'm going to give them a full plate so they can choose for themselves what they want as they continue to grow and mature and become young adults. And I'm just going to offer them the world and teach them the world accordingly. And there are going to be set boundaries, of course. But I'm going to try to be non-discriminative as it relates to information. I'm going to give you the information. I'm going to not necessarily try to decide for you what is true or necessarily who you are and who you're not. So I feel like if you start off your parenting process raising your children to be open-minded, exposing them to the world, talking to them about the world, about society, about culture, about what it means to be male, female. If you just like go there with you, because my approach to children is you're not raising a child, you're raising an adult. Childhood is going to be one time in your child's life. They're going to be adult for the rest of their life because that's what you're raising. You're raising an adult. So all these parents who be trying to like keep their 21-year-old a 13, that doesn't even make any fucking sense. You're trying to keep your 18-year-old 7 their whole life. That makes no fucking sense. You're not raising children. You're raising a fucking adult. Like, respect them like adults. Give them responsibilities. Give them access to freedom and choice. Allow them to know for themselves. Like, and just like, don't be afraid for them to take the same journey you had to take as a human being. And there was nothing your parents could do to stop the pain in your life. Pain is organic in life. Somebody's going to break your little princess's heart. Somebody's going to break your little boy's heart someday. These are all teachable moments. Like, yeah, there's no way to stop any of that. People want to. I'm like, the reason why your child is handicapped at 43 and I'm having to deal with him as a trifling Negro is because you have tried to save this Negro his whole fucking life. Now he's a weak man. Like, no. Like, the reason why I'm having issues with this woman in my life is because, Daddy, you done raised her to be narcissistic because you the one taught her that she's supposed to get everything she goddamn wants in life, and there's no place for dissatisfaction. There's no place for temporary agitation, and you've trained her that every man is to be subservient. Like, what? And now I'm dealing with this crazy hoe. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Let it go. Stop trying to save your children. Love them unconditionally. Support them. Hold them accountable. Give them the principles they need to be well in life, and let them do them. They will be fine.
Woke parenting 101. You need to write a book on it, man.
Let me tell you, it's going to happen anyway, because my parents did not raise me to be all this. They did not raise me to be mystic. They did not raise me to be liberated. That's why I always tell people, I always say the Holy Ghost raised me. My parents brought me into the world, but Spirit raised me. Everything that I am today is not due to the way I was raised. I had a traditional, regular ass upbringing by regular ass parents who did their regular ass best in life to provide a regular ass good life for me and my brother. Like, anything that you find to be woke or progressive about me has come through rebelling and aligning myself with that independence, irregardless of the consequences, irregardless of disappointing my parents. Like, it just was about me connecting to myself that put me on a path to evolve. So you still have a shot at evolving, even if you've been raised tight, even if you've been raised in this controlled environment like a damn lab rat. You still have plenty. Like, the universe will continue to push you and push you and push you and push you out. Now, whether you will respond to that pushing, because everybody gets a call, but very few answer. Very few answer.
Yeah.
Everybody's phone is ringing. God is ringing everybody's phone.
They said it in
ringing, and your indoctrination will allow you to answer is a whole nother thing. But your phone is ringing. Nonetheless.
Indeed.
Now we're going on 4 fucking hours.
All right, now I have to say, we could go for 10 hours, but I would just be doing that so I could like take the title on your channel. Well, I'll try again. My wife is in the other room, starving, I'm sure.
Yes, I am like very wife conscious right now. I'm like,
I haven't eaten anything either. I saw you was getting down earlier. I was like, man, I should have had some couple of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches ready, man.
You know, you gotta have lunch and dinner prepared for these type of comments. You know, we're gonna be here for.
I'm new to this whole podcast thing, man. I'm learning. I'm gonna have Lunchables ready next time.
Wow. What are y'all going to eat anyway?
I thought some chicken. Got some rice up there. I have some chicken and rice, man. Yeah.
Did you give him a treat? Come get a treat. Come on.
Before we get out of here, I think what D-Rock asked me, but I'm gonna ask you because I can do a separate video to answer his question instead of taking up too much time. But he asked me, could I share my idea about mental health and psychotherapy being free and mandatory in schools? What do you think about that? Therapy and mental health being a part of curriculum, because I had mentioned to D-Rock that I think that these things that are essential and fundamental to being a healthy human being in general, these things should not be things you have to learn in some church, possibly, or like
should be what our youth taught
curriculum
growing up. That and how to do taxes, and how to buy a house, and all sorts of other things. I feel like free and more accessible psychotherapy is very important, because a lot of our youth, and I know me in particular when I was younger, I was like a big ball of rage. I had no idea how to dispense it without getting into fights and this and that. So I feel like that would be very useful. There's a lot of like politics behind that and things to work out between what we teach our kids. I mean, that's a whole issue. But if we could, I would say that would definitely be good. If we could teach consciousness and enlightenment as a class in high school or something like that, I think that'd be amazing. Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a good thing. I could see how people would argue against it because, you know, there are going to be some people who don't want their kids to get that. They want to give it to their kids themselves. I understand that. So it would have to be something that a kid opts into. Like it'd have to be like an elective sort of class, you know, psychotherapy sessions. And it would also require a lot of faculty and resource to get every kid psychotherapy like that. Not to say it's impossible, and it's done to a certain degree, but it'd be very difficult. Like counselors do that to a certain degree now in schools. It would just be a little harder.
Yeah, you're right. There would definitely be a clapback, and I don't blame them. Not in this current serpent system. I don't blame any clapback.
Serpent system. That's another book, man.
Government system that cannot be trusted. But in an ideal world, mental health, even if it's not a part of curriculum, should be medical care in this country. In all countries should be free.
I mean, why not? Like, why not? How much money do we need to make?
Look, the majority of the reason why our world is sick is because human beings have been on their own. It's on their own. Walking around traumatized, walking around wounded, walking around in their shadow self, walking around in mutated version of themselves.
That's something we got to talk about. Shadow work. I'm learning about this whole thing. I'm definitely going to make some videos on it. But shadow work, like the Jungian theory of like the shadow self and dealing with like your raw nature and things like that. It's very, very interesting stuff.
Well, we're going to have to come back and do a collaboration video.
Again, yes. I'll come on anytime. Don't worry.
Soul retrieval and the whole nine. Like,
soul retrieve. Yeah, you got a lot to go into, man. I still haven't asked you about these aliens, man.
Man, we're get to the damn aliens. Like, what is it?
I don't know. I just it incites so much interesting conversation when we talk about aliens, because then it's like, who created us? And then you get into origin stories and
stories. My God, are we fucking aliens? You know what's interesting about the scriptures is that a lot of people think that Adam was made on the earth because he was made from matter. But the scriptures say that Adam was placed in the garden, which tells us that Adam was created somewhere else.
That is true. Yeah, it does say that. I recall that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Formed out of like some sort of clay, breathed into him, and then put him in the garden.
So there's a lot that our religions and scriptures suggest.
Look at you, man. Now you start talking about aliens, and it's like the Jews.
Okay, well, let's stop talking then. We are going to have a part 2, you guys.
Yeah.
You guys are going to be seeing Kyle regularly, okay? We're just brothers from another mother. So you guys are going to be seeing him on the platform. We'll come back and get into some of these other topics that we didn't get to. I can't believe 4 hours, and we didn't even touch on like 3, 4, 5 other major areas. However, once again, can you tell the people where they can find you?
Oh, yes. I have a YouTube channel by the same name, Melkez. Very simple. I'm on Instagram. I'm just terribly inactive because I don't take a lot of pictures or really anything. I'm on Twitter if you guys want to just get random gnosis and nonsense that I just think up and on the spot. You guys can hit me up there just to chat. And I've also got like my PayPal and other things like that, but I'm most active on YouTube. I am, if you know my channel, you know that I'm super active in the comments, and that's really all I do is comment and chat with people in there. And I've got my website as well if you guys are interested in
Of course they are.
coaching from me, in particular on how to astral project with the methods that I use and things like that. You guys can head to my website. And again, if you just want to chat, meet me on YouTube. I got tons of funny and lighthearted and spiritual videos on there to peruse.
To peruse, yes.
Perusal.
Well, you guys have heard it first. Once again, check out Kyle's interview with Truth Seeker as well over on Truth Seeker's platform. Also, check out my interview on Kyle's platform. Really amazing. And of course, subscribe, support, these young entrepreneurial folk out here making things happen. Melanated metaphysicians out here making things happen.
Metaphysicians.
And I hope that you guys enjoyed this dialogue, okay? I love you guys. I'm going to leave all of Kyle's information in the description box, so just be looking for the description box in about an hour, and it should be updated. And I love you all. And is there anything else you would like to kind of add on, or?
No, I think we touched on as much as we were going to in this talk. Yeah, just I love the community, especially. It's always fascinating for me to see people talking in the chat, and like, this is fascinating to me to see the community between people. Really inspiring, honestly.
That's why we do it. It's people who are here for this dialogue. They're here for these topics, contrary to popular belief. Everybody doesn't just enjoy TMZ in the Shade Room and reality TV and hot mess media. People still very much so are into their carrots and their collards and their fruits and their berries and their watermelons and everything that's nutritious in the world too. So I'm happy that God intersected us. What's interesting is that I just walked away from a very close relationship. Well, I walked away from 2 relationships this year, very significant relationships to me. And the universe always kind of fills in those spots. Every time I make room in my life, here comes new wine being ushered into the cellar. And so it's of no coincidence that you and I have
not at all
rendezvoused in this particular time in my life. Do you have any plans for New Year's?
Oh, geez, that's a little farther in advance that I've been looking lately. No, currently don't have any plans for New Year's. Shoot, I ain't got plans for really nothing. But the rest of today, I gotta speak to somebody at 6 my time, so gotta be ready for that. The Pentecostal holiness. Hey, we can get into the revival talks, man. I wanted to. We could have talked a lot about revivals and like Holy Ghost, and because I was big into like Pentecostal movements when I was.
Look, if you want to carry on, we that's up to you. I am free today, so
I know you are. I've got to go. I've got to get back to my life. I have to get off of the mountaintop.
And making the people watery at the mouth, okay? Because every time you be like, we could, they're just like, yeah, stay right here and do just that.
Stay here and complete it.
And do just that. But we will be back, you guys. I promise you that we will be back. Kyle, you make a promise on video that you will be back so we can hold you truly accountable. I will be back. You heard it first. If you guys want me to show up again, I will be back. It was honestly really fun. I like chatting with you guys for sure. Like the community. Yeah, man. It's amazing. There's a huge community, a huge spiritual community out here on these viral streets. So just connecting and plugging in and supporting each other is where it's at. I know you've been trying to get in contact with Cosmic too. I just spoke with him yesterday, so you should be hearing something back soon. Oh, for sure. I was about to say, homie don't answer his emails, bro. Yeah, I was about to send him another one. He had a personal assistant who who filters through his stuff or whatever. He didn't know who the hell it was. He was like, what? There's no way. Conscious TV didn't recommend me to nobody. So he deleted the email. He told her to trash it. He was like, this person is just...
It is what it is. I mean, even if you didn't talk to him, he'd see me on here and it'd be like, oh, that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't mean to offend him. I was just saying, hey, a mutual friend told me that I should hit you up.
He even saw your he didn't even see ours. He knew I was going to be interviewing with you, but he had not looked into your work yet. So he was like, oh my God, now I'm gonna have to. I said, no, it's fine. I said, yeah, but he is wanting to speak with you and interview with you. So we'll just make that happen for sure. So I think Kyle's camera has froze. Maybe my camera has froze. Has it froze? Yeah, his device froze. But nonetheless, I guess that was God's cue for us to get the hell up out of here. You guys have heard it first. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Share it out to your stream. Help to promote. Okay, the Consciouz TV platform. Subscribe to Kyle's platform. He's amazing. He'll teach you how to do all of the wonderful things. Okay, from astral projection to remote viewing to psychic sensory, it's everything. I will be back with you guys on Wednesday because I have episode 2 of the Canceled Show. Okay, me and the boys are going to be talking all things relationships and. Is there such thing as moving too fast in a relationship? Is there such thing as moving too slow in a relationship? We'll be getting to all of that and some of our experiences as millennial men who are here dating. So I expect to see all of you guys Wednesday night. Also, the Gentlemen's Panel will be hosted on my platform this coming Thursday. So I will be back with you guys on Thursday as well for a riveting show. Hope to see you guys all there. As well, we got a lot going on in the Conscious Kingdom, honey. We stay booked and busy around these pots. So I love you guys. Wonderful Monday. I will talk to you guys later.